Chapter 21:14. Doxian Zhuoan, where do you plan to go next? Inside the flying ship, Yin Bingyun looked at Zhuoan with a burning gaze. At the same time, her beautiful eyes glanced at the indifferent emperor spirit. In Yin Bingyun's opinion, although Zhuoan's cultivation was only at the 4th step of the virtual sky realm, his true strength should not be inferior to the 7th step of the virtual sky realm. Most importantly, Zhuoan had an 8-step virtual sky realm slave by his side. An 8-step virtual sky realm slave was already at the level of an ancestor of the 10 great sects in the star field. If this emperor spirit entered the star field, he would probably be able to stir up a storm. Even the 10 great sects would not dare to underestimate an existence like the emperor spirit. It could be said that the current Zhuoan had enough capital to establish a foothold in the star field. With Zhuoan's current foundation, even if countless cultivators in the star field knew that Zhuoan had a large amount of heavenly domain starry sky essence, who would dare to overestimate themselves and hunt him down? Back then, wasn't Zhuoan the target of public criticism because he was a rogue cultivator with no backing and no strength? If the heavenly domain starry sky essence was obtained by Yu Wuxi of the dark fantasy sect or the ancestors of the 10 great sects, who would dare to hunt him down so wantonly? Wasn't that just courting death? An ordinary man's wealth was his own ruin. As long as you were strong enough, so what if you had a treasure? Yin Bingyun knew very well that if Zhuoan returned to the star field now, who would dare to touch him? Moreover, Yin Bingyun also knew Zhuoan's character quite well. She knew that Zhuoan was not a saint. Back in the star field, he had suffered so much hostility and was hunted down. Zhuoan would not easily erase this debt. Zhuoan grinned, and a cold light flashed in his eyes as he said, "Of course I'm going back to the star field. I, Zhuoan, will now take back what you owe me in the star field." Hong Shan and Yun Chuyu looked at each other. They could see the joy in each other's eyes. When Yu Wuxi chased Zhuoan, they hid in Zhuoan's spirit ring and knew how dangerous it was at that time. At that time, if Zhuoan died, the 3 of them would die without a doubt. At that time, the 3 women were full of grievances. Now that Zhuoan had turned over a new leaf and was planning to go back and settle all his debts, how could they not have the same thought in their hearts? It was just that their strength was too low, so they naturally did not have the strength to do so. However, Zhuoan could help them vent their anger. But before returning to the star field, I need to develop my forces in the far west. Zhuoan's eyes lit up like starlight. The far west land was the only place in the Great Brahma region that wasn't under the jurisdiction of Great Brahma. Moreover, due to the enormous magnetic field in this place, it was difficult for the 10 great sects of the star field to extend their reach here. Therefore, this was. The was to the far star your forces. Yin Bingyun and the other 2 women were shocked, and their beautiful eyes were filled with doubt. Although Zhuoan was very strong and had an 8-step void sky slave, there were only 2 people. But after all, there were only 2 of them, and an organization could not be developed with just 2 experts. Instead, it required a huge amount of resources, sufficient time, and a succession of talents. It could be said that developing one's forces was an extremely troublesome problem. If Zhuoan really wanted to develop his forces, he would have to spend a lot of energy. For the 3 women, it was not worth it. Zhuoan saw the confusion on the 3 women's faces, but he did not explain. Instead, he smiled and said, "You will know when the time comes. For now, let's go back to Dub City." The 3 women were puzzled, but they did not ask. They knew that Zhuoan would not do anything he was not confident in. After a while, the flying ship landed in the sky above Dub City. Zhuoan looked at the king's spirit, who nodded and jumped out of the flying ship, floating above Dub City. Rumble. The king's spirit unscrupulously released the 8-step void sky aura, and invisible ripples like countless mountains crushed every corner of Dub City. The martial artists who were originally coming and going in Dub City trembled when they felt the terrifying aura that was like a mountain. There were even some fellows whose strengths were comparatively weaker who directly fell flat on their faces, cutting an extremely sorry figure. What's going on? What a terrifying aura. This is much more terrifying than the City Lord of Dub City. The City Lord is a 6-step void sky master. This person's aura is even more terrifying than the City Lord. Could it be a 7-step void sky master? This kind of master is rare in the far west. It seems that a big shot has come. In Dub City, countless cultivators looked at the king's spirit floating above Dub City with awe. Whoosh! The moment the king's spirit released his aura, a figure rushed out from the depths of Dub City. This was an old man dressed in coarse clothes. His white hair hung down to his waist and fluttered in the wind, giving him a natural and unrestrained feeling. The old man's eyes flashed with a dignified look. He rushed in front of the king's spirit and said respectfully, "Do Xian, I didn't know you were here. Please forgive me. I don't know if you..." Before Do Xian could finish, he was interrupted by the king's spirit. "You are the city lord of Dub City?" Do Xian lowered his posture and quickly said, "Yes, I am. What can I do for you, senior?" At this moment, Do Xian was extremely depressed. The middle-aged man in front of him was too terrifying. In front of this person, he was like an ant. Do Xian had seen a 7-step void sky cultivator before, but compared to this middle-aged man in front of him, he was still much weaker. This old man's luck can't be that bad, right? To actually encounter an 8th-step void heaven expert looking for trouble? Do Xian let his imagination run wild rather helplessly in his heart. Moreover, Do Xian really couldn't remember when he had offended such a master. The king's spirit nodded, withdrew his aura, and said indifferently, "My master has something to discuss with you. He hopes to talk further." Do Xian, who was originally thinking nonsense, was stunned when he heard this. He suspected that he had heard wrong. The middle-aged man in front of him was a supreme expert of void heaven 8 steps. In the entire far westland, there were probably only a few of such existences. Even in the entire Great Brahma domain, this person stood at the absolute pinnacle of experts. This kind of powerhouse would always make others slaves and be served by others. But now, such a master had finally appeared in front of Do Xian, and he was calling someone else master. This made Do Xian feel ridiculous and incredulous. In the entire Great Brahma heaven domain, what kind of person could make a supreme expert at the 8th step of the void heaven realm serve as a servant? Perhaps only the ruler of the Great Brahma domain, Great Brahma, had this qualification. However, according to the rumors, Great Brahma never set foot in the far westland after his battle with Luotian, so Do Xian naturally didn't think the master the king spirit was talking about was Great Brahma. As for what kind of genius would be able to make such a powerhouse serve as his servant? Do Xian was very curious. Under Do Xian's expectant gaze, a slender figure slowly walked down from the flying ship behind the king spirit. It was a rather handsome young man. His white robes were whiter than snow, and he looked like a white lotus. Behind the young man, there were 3 beautiful women with different temperaments walking over slowly. Do Xian was stunned, but not because of the young man's temperament or the 3 beautiful women behind him. It was because of the young man's aura. 4 steps void sky master? Do Xian was puzzled. He looked at the king's spirit in front of him as if to ask if the young man was really his master. The king's spirit didn't pay attention to Do Xian. Instead, he bowed to Zhuoan and respectfully said, "Master, this person is Do Xian, the city lord of Dub City." Do Xian's mouth was wide open, but he couldn't say a word. Or rather, he didn't know what to say. At this moment, the shock in his heart filled his entire body. He felt that what was happening in front of his eyes was too shocking and unrealistic. A mere 4 steps void sky master was actually the master of an 8 steps void sky master. This scene completely overturned Do Xian's worldview. "City Lord Do, my name is Zhuoan. It's an honor to meet you." Zhuoan came in front of Do Xian. Looking at the latter's dazed expression, he smiled slightly and took the initiative to extend his right hand. Do Xian came back to his senses and quickly reached out his hand to shake it. His expression was full of anxiety and fear. "Brother Zhuo." "No. Senior Zhuo, hello. I am the city lord of Dub City. Why are you looking for me?" Do Xian was certain that the young man in front of him was hiding his cultivation. His real identity must be an old monster who had been hiding for a long time. Thinking of this, Do Xian's heart became more and more respectful. His posture was extremely low. Zhuoan naturally didn't know what Do Xian was thinking. Seeing the latter so tactfully lowering his posture, His smile became even brighter. City Lord Do, I have a presumptuous request. I hope City Lord Do can help me, Zhuowen said with a smile. Do Xian didn't even think about it. He patted his chest and said, Senior Zhuo's matter is my matter. Senior Zhuo, you don't have to worry about me. Zhuowen smiled brightly and said, my presumptuous request is that City Lord Do can transfer Dub City to me. Of course, I won't let you suffer a loss. I will give you a satisfactory price. Chapter 21:15. 7 Profound Ganoderma. Seeing the bright smile on Zhuowen's face, Do Xian shuddered, and a chill rose in his heart. This, transfer Dub City? Do Xian stuttered slightly, and his face was quite ugly. He was the City Lord of Dub City, and Zhuowen's words were a disguised way to drive him away. It was a blatant attempt to seize power. Zhuowen just smiled and looked at Do Xian silently, but the King Spirit's eyes revealed undisguised murderous intent. Do Xian's eyes flickered, and he finally sighed and said, Senior Zhuo, since you have taken a fancy to Dub City, how can I dare to take your things? This Dub City will be my gift to you. Zhuowen smiled faintly. He took out a jade bottle and handed it to Do Xian. I have never forcefully taken what others like, but I do need a stronghold. Your Dub City's location is pretty good, so I plan to come down. But I won't let you suffer too much. The things in these 2 bottles are enough to make up for your Dub City. Do Xian was startled and subconsciously took the jade bottle, but he was a little angry. The huge Dub City had an immeasurable value. What precious thing could be in a mere jade bottle? How could it be compared to Dub City? In Do Xian's view, Zhuowen's move was humiliating him. But he had to suppress the anger in his heart and smile. After all, the person in front of him was not a master to be trifled with. It was only a matter of minutes to kill him. However, after Do Xian opened the bottle cork, he quickly closed it. The anger in his heart had long disappeared and was replaced by shock. Heavenly Domain Starry Sky Essence. And it's a whole bottle. Oh my God, am I dreaming? Do Xian's heart pounded, and he was very excited. Heavenly Domain Starry Sky Essence was extremely rare even in the core star field of the Great Brahma Domain, let alone a desolate place like the land of the Far West. In Do Xian's heart, a drop of Heavenly Domain Starry Sky Essence was comparable to the value of Dub City. But now, he actually got a full bottle of Heavenly Domain Starry Sky Essence, which was incredible. This bottle of Heavenly Domain Starry Sky Essence had far exceeded the value of Dub City itself. Speaking of which, Do Xian had taken a big bargain. Thinking up to here, Do Xian was rather terrified. He hurriedly bowed to Zhuowen and said, Senior Zhuo, this is truly too precious. Zhuowen waved his hand, but looked at Do Xian and said with a smile, You're also not far from breaking through to the Void Sky 7th step, right? Are you willing to join me? To tell you the truth, this bottle of Heavenly Domain Starry Sky Essence is insignificant in my inventory. If you sincerely submit to me, it won't be difficult for you to reach the Void Sky 7th step. Do Xian's heart jumped, but he revealed a trace of hesitation. But when he looked at the Heavenly Star Essence in his hand and the King Spirit behind Zhuowen, he gritted his teeth and said, If Senior can really help me break through to the Void Sky 7th step, I am willing to follow Senior. Haha. Then it's settled. As the host, are you going to let us stand outside like this? Zhuowen laughed heartily. Do Xian patted his forehead and hurriedly apologized, It's Junior's fault. Please follow me into Dub Pavilion. Dub Pavilion was the core of Dub City. It was also the pavilion where Do Xian, the city lord, lived. It was heavily guarded and there were many masters inside. In Dub Pavilion, Zhuowen sat in the main seat, the King Spirit sat next to him, and Yin Bingyun and the other 2 women sat below. Do Xian sat on the other side with a respectful expression and a smile on his face. Senior, Dub City is yours in the future. As long as you give the order, all the cultivators in Dub City can be used by you. Do Xian said with a smile. Zhuowen nodded and said in a low voice, Actually, I didn't buy your Dub City for the sake of controlling it, and I wanted to develop my own forces. To be honest, I have a doppelganger. He has a small world in his body. My people and force have been developing in that small world. But I don't feel at ease leaving them in the small world to develop, so I plan to bring them out. The location of your dub city is not bad, so I want to settle my people and forces in your dub city. Hearing this, Dou Xian showed a look of understanding. He nodded and said with a smile, Senior Zhuo, dub city is already yours. You can arrange it however you want. I will listen to all your orders, but Dou Xian's eyes became extremely hot as he said this. Zhuoan smiled and said, Don't worry, I will help you reach the 7th level of the void sky. As he said this, Zhuoan took out another item from the spiritual ring. This item was a type of Ganoderma, and its surface was colorful. Moreover, there was a colorful mist lingering around the Ganoderma, giving off an intoxicating immortal qi. The moment Dou Xian saw this Ganoderma, his eyes widened. His whole body trembled, and his lips trembled. He said uncertainly, Could this be 7 profound Ganoderma? The 7 profound Ganoderma had 7 colors. It was said that this Ganoderma was no different from an ordinary Ganoderma when it was young. But as time passed, the colors on the Ganoderma would slowly overlap, and it would eventually become a 7-colored Ganoderma. This kind of divine medicine was a level 8 divine medicine, and it was said that it could increase the chances of reaching the 7th level of the void sky from the 6th level of the void sky. As long as a cultivator had this 7 profound Ganoderma, they would be able to successfully break through the 7th level of the void sky. But as a level 8 divine medicine, the 7 profound Ganoderma was even rarer than the heavenly domain starry marrow. Zhuoan had obtained this kind of divine medicine from the countless resources of the Luotian Palace. The Luotian Palace was a giant force that had produced an ultimate powerhouse who reached the 9th level of the void sky millions of years ago. It had a deep foundation, so it naturally had a certain amount of 7 profound Ganoderma. Is it enough? Zhuoan asked indifferently. Dou Xian forced himself to calm down and said hastily, Yes, it's more than enough. Then sign a contract with me. I will help you reach the 7th level of the void sky, and you will follow me for 1,000 years. What do you think? Zhuoan smiled. Dou Xian was surprised. Then, he nodded and said, I agree. After the two of them signed the contract, Zhuoan gave the 7 profound Ganoderma to Dou Xian. The latter was so happy that he carefully put the 7 profound Ganoderma away. Zhuoan stayed in Dub City for half a month. During this time, Zhuoan moved the Heavenly Armor Star and the Crepe Myrtle Galaxy out of Devourer's space. When Yin Bingyun and Yun Chuyu saw the Crepe Myrtle Galaxy, they were stunned at first. Then, they looked grateful. They didn't expect that Zhuoan would put the Crepe Myrtle Galaxy, which had become a dead area, into his small world. This made them feel touched and guilty. With the help of the King Spirit and Dou Xian, the Crepe Myrtle Galaxy and the Heavenly Armor Star were placed around Dub City. Due to the Great War millions of years ago, there were almost no complete life planets in the far west, let alone galaxies. Especially in the infinite magnet sea, the forces were basically built on huge meteorites. It was impossible for any planets or galaxies to exist. If the Crepe Myrtle Galaxy was taken out and placed around Dub City, it would attract the attention of many other forces. Especially in the Crepe Myrtle Galaxy, the area of any life planet was comparable to the meteorite where Dub City was located. Most of the cultivators in Dub City moved to the Crepe Myrtle Galaxy. After all, the meteorite where Dub City was located was desolate and barren. Not even a blade of grass grew there. Most of it was maintained by cultivators with their divine power. However, life planets were different. There were seas, forests, plains, hills, and many other magnificent scenes. They were extremely beautiful. This was extremely new to many cultivators in the far west. Of course, some cultivators who had been to the far west were not surprised by this. They were shocked by what kind of cultivator could move an entire galaxy and place it in the infinite magnet sea. The rumor of the void sky 8 steps in this galaxy had also spread. Although many forces coveted the beauty of the Crepe Myrtle Galaxy, they did not dare to make a move. The 8 void sky steps was enough to dominate the far west. Who would dare to provoke it? Zhuoan brought all the Rikeres higher-ups to Dub City. The experts in Dub City were now under Zhuoan's command. Dou Xian had already gone into seclusion and did not care about the affairs of Dub City at all. Father, mother, in the future, the Long family will develop here. I believe that with the resources our Long family currently possesses, as long as we have enough time to develop, we will have more and more experts. Eventually, we will become a colossal force. Zhuowen stood on the railing of the attic and looked into the distance. Long Xiaotian and Feng Xiao stood behind him, leaning against each other. The two of them didn't say anything, only silently looking at Zhuowen's back, the corners of their mouths filled with pride. Both of them had broken through to the void sky step, but their realms were not high. However, to be able to see that their son was actually so capable, their hearts were filled with gratification and joy. Which parents in the world did not want their children to succeed? The higher Zhuowen's achievements were, the prouder they would be as his parents. Rika has really risen. It was just an insignificant force in the heavenly armor continent. It has become so powerful and will continue to grow. It is really incredible, Long Xiaotian murmured in a low voice. His eyes were full of reminiscence. Yes, all of this cannot be separated from Wen-Er's contribution. Chapter 21:16. Old Man Heartless King Spirit, how many 8th step void sky cultivators are there in the far west? Zhuowen stood with his hands behind his back, gazing into the distance as he asked. The king spirit standing behind Zhuowen replied, in the far west, there is only one other than me. Moreover, this person is eccentric and unruly. He is older and stronger than me. Who is he? Zhuowen asked curiously. Originally, Zhuowen thought that in a desolate place like the far west, the king spirit would be the strongest. He didn't expect there to be an 8th step void sky cultivator here. Moreover, it seemed that this 8th step void sky cultivator took longer than the king spirit. This person is nicknamed Old Man Heartless. He is a reclusive and low-key person. In the far west, his name is not well known at all. Only those void sky 5th ascension experts in the far west know of Old Wu Qing's name. Moreover, Old Man Wu Qing's cave is extremely secretive. Most of the cultivators in the far west don't know about it, and I accidentally entered his cave. At that time, I was beaten half to death by him and barely escaped. Speaking of this, the king spirit's mouth twitched, as if he couldn't bear to look back on the past. Zhuowen's gaze was strange as he smiled and said, so that's how it is. Old Man Heartless is not a bad person. At that time, he only taught you a lesson and didn't kill you. The king spirit shrugged and said helplessly, although I didn't have much contact with Old Man Heartless, I can feel that he is indeed not a bad person. May I know why Master is looking for him? The corners of Zhuowen's mouth twitched as he said indifferently, to be honest, I was driven out by many forces in the starfield and ended up here in the far west. There are some old scores that I want to settle back in the starfield. The king spirit's eyes were sharp as he asked, Master, do you plan to ask Old Man Heartless to help you? Zhuowen nodded and said, from your words, I can see that Old Man Heartless is stronger than you. He should not be weaker than the ancestors of the Starfield's 10 great sects, perhaps even stronger. Such a character naturally needs to be invited. The king spirit said, Heartless old man doesn't leave his cave easily. If you want to convince him, the chances of success are low. If we have the blood of the heavenly Tao, will the success rate be very low? Zhuowen asked with a smile. Di Ling's eyes flashed as he said, that might not be the case. Haha, take me to Old Man Wu Qing. Zhuowen laughed. After receiving the king spirit's promise, Zhuowen spoke to Long Xiaotian and the other Rika leaders, as well as Yin Bingyun and the other 2 girls, before leaving Dub City. In the deepest depths of the myriad magnet sea, there was an extremely large uninhabited area. This area covered an area of 100 million kilometers. The reason it was an uninhabited area was mainly because the magnetic field here was the strongest in the entire myriad magnet sea. The moment Zhuowen's flying ship entered the area, it immediately trembled violently. All the equipment in the main control room was destroyed by the powerful magnetic field, and the entire flying ship was turned into scrap metal. Zhuowen and King Spirit walked out of the ship. What a powerful magnetic field! The moment Zhuowen walked out of the ship, he felt a terrifying magnetic force crushing his body. It made him feel as if 1,000 mountains were pressing down on him. He knew this was because the magnetic field was too strong. The magnetic field here is much stronger than before. When I first came here, the magnetic field was not this strong, King Spirit explained. Zhuowen waved his hand and asked, "Do you still know where Old Man Wu Qing is?" King Spirit said, "Yes. Master, follow me. Old Man Wu Qing's cave is not far from here." Although the magnetic field had a strong interference effect on the divine sense, neither of them were ordinary people. They could tell the direction within a short distance. Not long after, King Spirit and Zhuowen arrived at a huge canyon suspended in the middle of the magnetic field. The canyon was as dark as ink, and there was a black fog rolling around it. The fog followed a certain pattern, and it kept floating and rolling upwards, forming a hideous skull shape. It was invisible, and it exuded a strange aura. "Is this Old Man Wu Qing's cave?" Zhuowen asked quietly. King Spirit nodded, then looked at the entrance of the canyon and said, "This canyon is set up by Old Man Wu Qing. If we want to find him, we have to go through this canyon. The reason why I was able to enter back then was actually by accident. I don't know how I entered the cave." Zhuowen entered the canyon, and his eyes became very serious. He realized that the restrictions in the canyon were very mysterious. They were far beyond his array formation skills. They were much better than the Ghost Curse Lady, who had entered the Luo God Palace with him. The Ghost Curse Lady was a level 7 array formation master, and the restrictions in this canyon were at least at the level of a level 8 array formation master. "This canyon is filled with level 8 arrays," Zhuowen said solemnly. King Spirit was shocked and said helplessly, "Then what should we do?" Although King Spirit knew that Zhuowen's array formation was very powerful, he was only a level 6 array formation master. It was almost impossible for him to break through the endless level 8 array formations in the canyon. "Let's go." Zhuowen's eyes were sharp. His divine soul was unprecedentedly powerful. Although his formation Dao was not comparable to a level 8 formation Dao master, his divine soul was not any weaker than a level 8 formation Dao master. If he was asked to set up a level 8 array formation, Zhuowen would not be able to do it. However, with his powerful spirit, Zhuowen could easily observe these level 8 spirit arrays and find the flaws in these spirit arrays and exploit them. Thinking of this, Zhuowen took a step forward and entered the canyon. There was an extremely powerful array formation at the entrance. Zhuowen scanned it with his soul, and after 10 breaths, he finally found the flaw in the array formation. Immediately after, his divine sense transformed into a violent storm and fiercely bombarded the gap, causing the array to instantly fall into a weakened state. "Let's go," Zhuowen said to the King Spirit. Then, he stepped into the canyon. King Spirit was stunned at first, but he quickly reacted and followed in. The King Spirit was impressed by Zhuowen's bravery, though. If it were him, he would not be able to do anything about the array formation in the canyon. The canyon was not very long, only about 4,000 meters long. For elites like Zhuowen and King Spirit, it would only take them a single step to cross that distance. But now, it was difficult for them to walk in the canyon. As they entered the canyon, the array formation became denser and more powerful. The speed of their progress became slower. But Zhuowen was not discouraged. Instead, he became more and more excited. While he was breaking the array formation, he was also learning how to arrange the array formation around him. As he continued to break the array formation, Zhuowen's understanding of the array formation increased rapidly. After all, level 8 formations could be seen everywhere in the gorge. Since Zhuowen had seen a lot of level 8 formations, he naturally had a rough understanding of many level 8 formations. Moreover, he was able to figure out the principles and trajectories of level 8 formations by breaking through the formations. It could be said to be extremely beneficial to him. Inside the canyon, Zhuowen and King Spirit walked for 3 months. Finally, they reached the end of the canyon. "Finally, we are out." King Spirit breathed a sigh of relief, and a relaxed smile appeared on his face. For the past 3 months, King Spirit had been worried that Zhuowen would trigger the level 8 array formation. King Spirits were not afraid of level 8 arrays, but there was more than one level 8 array in the valley. If one of them was triggered, the entire array formation would be triggered. With so many level 8 arrays activated at the same time, even King Spirit would not be able to withstand it. However, just as the King Spirit took a step forward, it was stopped by Zhuo Wen. Master, what is it? King Spirit looked at Zhuo Wen with confusion. However, Zhuo Wen's eyes were filled with seriousness. He said in a heavy voice, "There's another formation here. If I'm not wrong, the formation at the end of the gorge is the source of all the formations in the gorge. It's also the strongest formation. If you continue on like this, I don't know what will happen." King Spirit's body trembled, and he immediately stopped. He took a few steps back, and his eyes were full of fear. King Spirit's consciousness scanned the area, but he could not find any trace of the array formation. Don't waste your time. There is a powerful shielding array outside this array formation. It has already blocked your divine sense. How can you still detect it? Zhuo Wen said, and then took 9 steps forward. He took out 9 palm-sized array discs from his spirit ring. Zhuo Wen quickly formed a seal with his hands. Then, the 9 array discs quickly assembled and arranged themselves into the shape of a tower in the void. Creak, creak. The sound of machinery rolling could be heard from the inside of the 9 array discs. Then, a few meters in front of Zhuo Wen, dense invisible ripples appeared. Whoosh! The instant the invisible ripples surged out, a frightening gale whistled and swept out, causing Zhuo Wen's white robes to flutter and flutter. Zhuo Wen's hair flew in the wind, and he stood still like a rock. His right hand formed a sword finger and quickly moved on the 9 array discs. Then, dazzling lines appeared on the surface of the array discs, like veins, filling the surface of the array discs. King Spirit's pupils shrank, and he saw the quiet air in front of him surge violently. Immediately, the King Spirit's divine sense detected an array that was much larger than any of the other level 8 arrays in the canyon. The King Spirit licked his lips and said, "Isn't this a bit too scary? It is much stronger than a level 8 array formation. It must be at least a level 9 array formation." Chapter 21:17. Breaking the array. Who is it? Zhuo Wen turned his head and saw a white-haired old man in a green robe slowly walking over from the end of the array. The old man was extremely short, only reaching Zhuo Wen's abdomen. He was as tall as a child. "Master, it's old man Wu Qing," the King Spirit reminded him in a low voice. Zhuo Wen was startled. He looked at the dwarf old man from head to toe, but his heart was full of curiosity. Old man Wu Qing. Hearing this name, he should be a peerless expert with extraordinary charm and bearing. But now, the old man in front of Zhuo Wen looked a little too shabby. It was almost unbearable to look at him directly. Seeing Zhuo Wen staring at him, old man Wu Qing raised his head and said pretentiously, "Boy, are you staring at me like this because you think I'm handsome and extraordinary? Are you ashamed of your inferiority?" Zhuo Wen stood where he was and thought for a moment, then said in a deep voice, "Senior, I think you have an extraordinary bearing, so I came to visit you. I just don't know if you can break this array." Old man Wu Qing's right hand gently lifted the white hair in front of his forehead and sighed softly. "Sometimes, this old man is too eye-catching. Although it's not my fault, in order to avoid those crazy girls, this old man has lived here for a long time for peace and quiet." The corners of the King Spirit's eyes twitched. He opened his mouth, but he still couldn't bear to tell the truth. He knew very well that when he entered the canyon and met old man Wu Qing, it was because he was too honest and told the truth that he was beaten up by old man Wu Qing. "Oh, so it's you, boy. You just left last time. Why are you here again? If you still want to slander this old man like last time, this old man will have to stretch his muscles again." Old man Wu Qing noticed the King Spirit behind Zhuo Wen. He couldn't help but pinch his hands and grin, his tone full of impoliteness. The King Spirit's body trembled. The years when he was beaten by old man Wu Qing were definitely the most miserable and painful years. Old man Wu Qing's control over his strength was extremely precise. Every single punch would not cause too much damage, but it would make one wish they were dead. Although the King Spirit had reached Hollow Sky 8 levels, Old Man Heartless had left a shadow in his heart. Now that he saw Old Man Heartless again, he couldn't help but feel scared. Hey! He actually reached Void Sky 8 steps. The speed of improvement was really fast. It hasn't even been that long, And you've already advanced. Old man Wu Qing finally noticed the powerful aura of the king spirit. He raised his eyebrows and asked in surprise. He. How have you been, senior? Ever since the last time I met you, I've always thought you were a handsome man, the king spirit said with a flattering smile. Old man Wu Qing revealed an expression as if he had learned something. He nodded and said, That's right. You've finally spoken the truth. If you were as honest as you were last time, you wouldn't have had to suffer. The king spirit forced a smile on his face, but he had nothing to say. Last time, he had spoken the truth, which was why he had been beaten to a pulp by old man Wu Qing. If the king spirit was still so honest this time, he might have been beaten up by old man Wu Qing again. Senior, can you undo the formation and talk further? Zhuowen reminded again. Old man Wu Qing waved his hand and said, Why are you in such a hurry? This old man noticed you just now. Your soul is really extraordinarily powerful. If it weren't for that, it would have been really difficult for you to pass through this canyon. If you really want to talk to this old man, then how about you try walking out of this formation? After you walk out, you can slowly talk to this old man. After saying that, old man Wu Qing put his hands behind his back and left with a faint smile. Zhuowen stood in place and frowned slightly. He understood what old man Wu Qing meant. A hermit like old man Wu Qing wouldn't meet an unfamiliar cultivator for no reason unless Zhuowen proved that he was qualified to talk to old man Wu Qing. And the way to prove that was through the formation in front of him. As long as Zhuowen could break this formation, then he would be qualified to talk to old man Wu Qing in detail. Old man Wu Qing left so quickly that it was as if he had disappeared. Zhuowen didn't even have time to mention the blood of heaven's path. Master, what should we do? The king spirit asked. Break the formation. Zhuowen sighed and looked at the formation in front of him. King spirit, wait for me outside. If I can successfully pass through this formation, I will come back and bring you out. King spirit nodded and sat cross-legged on the ground. Although king spirit's cultivation was very high, he knew nothing about formations. He only had brute force. If he entered the formation, not only would he not be able to help Zhuowen, but he would also be a burden to Zhuowen. Zhuowen summoned the no-beginning demonic golden sword and surrounded his body. At the same time, he held the glorious purple galaxy sword in his hand and slowly walked into the formation in front of him. The formation was extremely large, as big as a football field. At a glance, it was surrounded by a grey liquid barrier. The instant Zhuowen entered the great formation, a terrifying noise suddenly sounded in his ears. This cacophony contained the terrifying sounds of wild beasts, thunderbolts, mountain torrents, tsunamis, and other earth-shattering noises. All of them assaulted Zhuowen's eardrums, causing him to feel dizzy. Shaking his head, Zhuowen hurriedly protected his hearing and decisively sealed it off. However, the instant his hearing was sealed, he immediately smelled a nauseating stench. This stench was too pungent, causing Zhuowen's stomach to churn. He wanted nothing more than to throw his stomach out. Zhuowen decisively sealed his sense of smell, followed by his sight, touch, and even taste. The moment he entered the formation, Zhuowen could not help but seal his 5 senses. Moreover, it was not forced by the formation. Instead, it was because Zhuowen had encountered something that he hated the most with his 5 senses, so he had voluntarily sealed his 5 senses. However, when Zhuowen's 5 senses were sealed, he found that he could not release them at all. At this moment, Zhuowen became extremely calm. He knew that this was the formation's attack method. The first step was to cut off his 5 senses. Poochie. Zhuowen growled. Then, he felt an intense pain coming from his right arm. Then, he found that his right arm could not exert any strength. To be more precise, his right arm could not feel anything. It was as if his right arm had been chopped off. Following that, Zhuowen's left arm, right foot, left foot, and even his entire body seemed to have been torn apart. The pain was so real that Zhuowen was so frightened that he broke out in a cold sweat. The intense pain caused panic to rise in his heart. At this moment, Zhuowen even felt that a pair of hands were wantonly stirring his abdomen. The hands were casually tearing and twisting his intestines as if they were playing with his body. Zhuowen wanted to retreat and avoid the touch of these strange hands. However, he found that he could no longer move his limbs. To be more precise, his limbs had been completely cut off, and he had no medium to grab at all. At that moment, Zhuowen could clearly feel the pair of hands that had sunk deep into his abdomen slowly move up and across his chest. Then, he could clearly feel the pair of hands pulling open his chest completely, revealing his heart inside. The intense pain stimulated Zhuowen so much that he almost vomited. He really wanted to see who was treating him so cruelly. However, he struggled hard and found that he had completely lost his vision. He couldn't see what was happening in front of him at all. Zhuowen wanted to speak with difficulty, but found that he couldn't open his mouth at all. He couldn't make any sound. The hands seemed to be tired of playing with Zhuowen's chest and then set their target on Zhuowen's head. Zhuowen felt a pair of sharp nails stop at the center of his eyebrows. Then, they slowly pierced into the deepest part of his forehead. Poochie. Suddenly, blood spurted out. Then, the sharp nails pierced into the deepest part of his forehead. Then, they wantonly stirred, causing blood to spurt out. Zhuowen almost fainted from the pain, but the hateful nails wantonly stirred his forehead, causing him to be abnormally clear-headed. This abuse lasted for half an hour. Then, the nails fiercely opened Zhuowen's forehead. Then, Zhuowen completely lost consciousness. When Zhuowen opened his eyes with difficulty, he subconsciously sat up. He looked around and found that he was still in the Great Array. Zhuowen looked at his body again and found that he was safe and sound. Taking a deep breath, Zhuowen's eyes shone brightly. He said in a deep voice, "What a realistic illusion. That pain almost penetrated into my bones." While Zhuowen was speaking, the unbearable noise came to Zhuowen's ears again. However, Zhuowen resisted and didn't take the initiative to seal his hearing. He knew very well that once he sealed his hearing, it would be the same as before. Gradually, his 5 senses would be sealed and he would fall into an even more terrifying illusion. Zhuowen sat cross-legged on the spot and took a deep breath. The more than 3,000 divine soul galaxies in his spiritual space began to operate at the same time. The extremely terrifying divine sense swept up around Zhuowen like a hurricane, causing Zhuowen's sleeves to flutter. "I must find the flaw in this great array." Zhuowen's eyes showed a determined look. At the same time, he began to learn the specific patterns and operating trajectories of this great array. After this trip to the canyon, Zhuowen had studied many level 8 great arrays. His understanding of array Dao had deepened, and his array Dao level was approaching the edge of level 7. Zhuowen believed that it wouldn't be long before his array Dao level could completely advance to level 7. If he could advance to level 7, then his divine sense would become even sharper and more powerful. By then, it would be more than enough to find the flaw in this level 8 great array. Chapter 21:18. Chiller time gradually passed. Zhuowen sat in the array without moving. His powerful spiritual sense spread out like a curtain of rain, searching for the various flaws in the array. This spirit array was much stronger than an ordinary grade 8 spirit array. It was airtight, and no matter how Zhuowen used his divine sense to scan it, he could not find any flaws in the spirit array. However, Zhuowen wasn't in a hurry. Instead, he scanned the grand formation over and over again. With his powerful divine sense, he observed the veins and circulation paths of the entire grand formation, silently verifying his own level, and ceaselessly learning and comprehending. Zhuowen could clearly feel that he was not far from becoming a level 7 formation Dao master. Especially after comprehending all the level 8 arrays in the canyon, his perception had increased to an unimaginable level. He could feel that he was only a thin layer away from becoming a level 7 formation Dao master. As long as Zhuowen pierced through this thin layer, he would be able to become a level 7 formation Dao master. 1 month, 2 months. Up until the 8th month, Zhuowen practically sat cross-legged within the grand formation, breathing and exhaling while his divine sense swept through everything within the grand formation at all times. Suddenly, Zhuowen slowly opened his eyes. His eyes were bursting with a radiance that was difficult to look at. Rumble. Zhuowen stood up with a swoosh. From the depths of his eyebrows, a terrifying aura erupted like a volcano. This aura was continuous and endless. It was like a tsunami, rolling over. Moreover, this aura was not material. It was purely the powerful fluctuation of his consciousness. There was no doubt that Zhuowen's consciousness had reached an unprecedented level of strength. I have finally reached the level of a level 7 formation Dao master. Zhuowen's eyes were bursting with divine light. The corners of his mouth curved into a joyful arc. Although a level 7 formation Dao master was not that great, Zhuowen was different. His consciousness was very powerful. Although he was only a level 7 formation Dao master, with his powerful consciousness, he was far more powerful than an ordinary level 7 formation Dao master. He was infinitely close to becoming a level 8 formation Dao master. Let's see if we can find a flaw in this formation. Zhuowen's eyes flickered. His soul consciousness, which was as terrifying as a hurricane, instantly swept out and covered the surroundings of the grand formation. At the same time, Zhuowen was constantly calculating and comparing the differences between the large arrays in his heart, looking for the similarities between them. He deduced for 3 days and 3 nights. Finally, on the 3rd day, he slowly opened his eyes. His feet moved in a mysterious manner as he slowly walked forward. Finally, he stopped at the end of the array. Zhuowen's right hand formed a finger sword and pressed against the edge of the array. The moment he touched the array, Zhuowen's finger sword changed rapidly. Rumble. Muffled thunderous sounds rang out continuously, and then the entire formation began to tremble violently. The originally illusory formation had actually materialized. Terrifying cracks had appeared on its surface, as if it would shatter at any moment. The formation trembled more and more violently, so much so that the entire canyon shook violently. Countless cracks appeared on both sides of the canyon, and countless rocks fell down. Outside the formation, the King Spirit's eyes were solemn. He could not help but take a few steps back and murmured in a low voice, "It's been more than 8 months. Finally, there's something. I wonder if Master can break this formation." In front of the exit of the canyon, a short old man slowly appeared. He squinted his eyes and stared at the young man who was constantly deducing and breaking the formation. He nodded slightly and said, "What an extraordinary boy. His divine soul is so powerful, and his comprehension is also very high." This person was none other than the master of the canyon, Old Man Wu Qing. Old Man Wu Qing's withered right hand suddenly clenched the void. The powerful formation that was originally enveloping Zhuowen instantly disappeared. Zhuowen, who was originally breaking the formation, was puzzled. He slowly walked out and saw Old Man Wu Qing standing on a huge rock in front of him. "Master, you broke it." The King Spirit rushed behind Zhuowen and asked in surprise. This formation was very powerful, and the King Spirit could feel it. Although he knew that Zhuowen was not simple, he did not expect Zhuowen to break it so quickly. "I'm still a distance away from breaking the formation." It was Senior Wu Qing who broke the formation. Zhuowen shook his head. Old Man Wu Qing put his hands behind his back and grinned. "Young man, you're quite humble. If I let you stay any longer, this formation will definitely break." Zhuowen smiled faintly and said, "The result now is that this formation was not broken by me, but was saved by Senior, isn't that right?" Old Man Wu Qing laughed and said, "Not bad, not bad. You're quite good with words. Come in." As he spoke, Old Man Wu Qing stooped and slowly walked into the depths of the canyon. Zhuowen and the King Spirit looked at each other and followed closely behind. Behind the huge rock where Old Man Wu Qing was standing was a winding path. It twisted and turned like a snake. Green bamboo grew on both sides of the path, and it looked very tall and straight. After walking for about half an hour, Zhuowen found that at the end of the path was a very quiet valley. There was a giant waterfall and a small pool near the edge of the valley. Other than that, there was a small bamboo house. In front of the house, there was a stone table and 3 stone stools. Old Man Wu Qing sat on one of the stools. He looked at Zhuowen and the King Spirit and gestured for them to sit. After Zhuowen and the King Spirit sat down, Old Man Wu Qing poured a cup of tea. He took a sip and said, "If you want to drink tea, go ahead. I don't have the habit of serving others." Zhuowen smiled faintly, but he was not angered by Old Wu Qing's arrogant attitude at all. "Kid, you're not easy. You were beaten up by me last time, but you're still conscious. You remember the location of my cave. Old man emotionless took another sip of tea and spoke to King Spirit coldly. The King Spirit nodded and smiled. Because I admire you so much, I have to remember the location of your cave. Oh, why don't you show it to me now? Old man Wu Qing said nonchalantly. The King Spirit's mouth was stiff, but he did not say anything. Although the King Spirit had reached virtual Sky 8 levels, if they fought, Old man Wu Qing would not be able to kill him. However, the King Spirit had been beaten up too badly by Old man Wu Qing. He was scared, and there was a shadow in his heart. Now that he saw Old man Wu Qing, the King Spirit felt inferior. He did not dare speak too loudly. Senior, we're actually here to make a deal with you. At that moment, Zhuowen spoke. Old man Wu Qing looked at Zhuowen. Zhuowen's power was not strong. He was only virtual Sky 4 levels. In Old man Wu Qing's eyes, such a cultivation was no different from an ant. However, Old man Wu Qing did not underestimate this child. Not to mention that the King Spirit had recognized this person as his master, this child had almost broken the formation he was proud of. He knew that this child was not simple. A deal? What kind of deal? Old man Wu Qing's tone was perfunctory. He had lived in seclusion here for countless years, and he had long lost his ambition. If there was anything, it was that he had an indescribable fanatical pursuit of the virtual Sky 9 levels. However, the virtual Sky 9 levels was not something that could be broken through just because one wanted to. One needed talent, opportunity, and luck. Old man Wu Qing was already at the peak of virtual Sky 8 levels. To put it nicely, he was only half a step away from virtual Sky 9 levels. However, Old man Wu Qing knew that this half a step was like the distance between heaven and earth. As for other things, Old man Wu Qing was not tempted. Blood of the heavenly path, Zhuowen said slowly. Old man Wu Qing's eyes slowly widened. He stared at Zhuowen and said as if he was in a dream, "What did you say? Say it again." The corners of Zhuowen's mouth curled up slightly. He then stood up and glanced at the King Spirit. The latter nodded, and the two of them actually walked out of the valley as if they were going to leave. Old man Wu Qing's breathing quickened. He hurriedly chased after them and stopped in front of Zhuowen. He asked in a deep voice, "Is the blood of the heavenly path that you mentioned formed from the rules of the heavenly path? Senior, what do you think?" Zhuowen asked meaningfully. Old man Wu Qing nodded. He gestured with his right hand, and said, "Little brother, I was a little negligent just now. Please sit." Zhuowen nodded slightly. Then, he swaggered onto the stone platform and sat down. Old man Wu Qing asked impatiently, "You plan to trade the blood of the heavenly path to me? If you really have it, I definitely won't let you suffer a loss." Zhuowen still shook his head. Old man Wu Qing's face darkened, and he said, "Are you going back on your word?" Zhuowen smiled faintly and said, "I do have the blood of the heavenly path, but I don't plan to trade it to you. Instead, I can give you 10 days to comprehend it." Old man Wu Qing frowned slightly and said in a low voice, "Only 10 days? What's your condition? How about you come out and kill someone for me?" Zhuowen said. Old man Wu Qing's eyes flickered, but he shook his head and said, 10 days is too short." The corners of Zhuowen's mouth revealed a sly smile as he said, "How about this? You'll protect me for however many days you comprehend. How about that? You want me to be your fighter?" Chapter 21:19. The Way of Heaven. Senior, I don't want you to be my fighter. I want you to protect me. I don't want to restrict your freedom, Zhuowen said with a smile. Old man Wu Qing's eyes became sharper. He stared at the young man in front of him coldly and released an unprecedented murderous intent. The King Spirit's eyes trembled, but he reacted immediately. He released his 8-level Void Sky aura without holding back and stood in front of Zhuowen. "Senior, why are you so impulsive?" Zhuowen took a sip of tea and said slowly. Old man Wu Qing's gaze became even sharper. He said coldly, "You sure are bold. Now that you're acting so arrogantly in my territory, aren't you afraid that I'll kill you and take your heavenly way blood?" Zhuowen was not moved. He said, "Nothing ventured, nothing gained. Since I came here today, I am confident. Do you think I will bring something as important as the blood of heaven with me when I enter your territory? Old man Wu Qing frowned, and his murderous intent became stronger. The king's spirit in front of Zhuowen did not dare relax, but his heart trembled. They were both 8-level Void Sky elites, but the king's spirit was not confident that he could defeat Old Man Wu Qing. Old Man Wu Qing suddenly laughed, and his murderous intent disappeared. He looked at Zhuowen and said, "Your cultivation is not high, but your courage is not small." "Senior, what do you mean?" Zhuowen narrowed his eyes and asked knowingly. "Humph. You win, and I agree to your conditions. However, I want to make it clear that I will only protect you. Don't think you can order me around," Old Man Wu Qing said again. Zhuowen smiled and said, "Of course." Old Man Wu Qing waved his sleeve, and the huge waterfall beside the small bamboo house suddenly stopped flowing. Splash! The entire waterfall began to spin clockwise, and it spun faster and faster. Finally, in the middle of the waterfall, a black hole appeared. It was bottomless. "However, you need to show some sincerity, kid. Go out and bring me the heavenly Dao blood. Only then will I feel more at ease," Old Man Wu Qing said coolly. Zhuowen nodded and said, "Of course. But before that, shouldn't Senior establish a contract with me? If anyone violates the contract, they will suffer a backlash from the heavenly Dao." Old Man Wu Qing's gaze turned cold. It wasn't that he hadn't made a contract before, but most of the time, he had made a contract while facing the Starry Skies rules. As for the heavenly Dao laws, he had never made a contract. After all, the heavenly Dao was a power of a higher level. If he suffered a backlash from the heavenly Dao laws, even Elder Heartless would have the risk of dying. It could be said that once this kind of contract was established, the degree of trust would be the highest. Of course, if someone went back on their word, the punishment would also be the most severe. "What? Does Senior feel that this contract is inappropriate?" Zhuowen asked solemnly. Old Man Wu Qing shrugged and said, "I don't think it's inappropriate. I just feel surprised." After he finished speaking, Old Wu Qing slashed with his right hand, and a line of blood appeared on his left thumb. Fresh blood spilled out and gathered to form a blood-colored picture. If one looked carefully, they would be able to see that this blood-colored picture was a blood-colored 6-point star array. Zhuowen followed suit and also used his own blood as a guide to draw the same blood-colored 6-point star array. The two blood-colored 6-point star arrays began to intersect and overlap with each other. Finally, they burst out with an unprecedentedly terrifying blood-colored light that filled the entire sky. At the end of the starry sky, an invisible and formless hand stretched out. This hand was clearly invisible and formless, but the three people present could clearly feel that this was a big hand that made their hearts tremble. The moment this big hand pinched the two blood-colored 6-point star arrays, Zhuowen and Elder Heartless could clearly feel that their hearts were firmly pinched by this big hand. As long as this big hand was slightly stronger, it could completely crush their hearts. This is the power of the heavenly Dao. Zhuowen narrowed his eyes, but fear rose in his heart. After the big hand formed by the heavenly Dao pinched the 6-point star array, it slowly disappeared into the starry sky. That's right. Heavenly Dao, oh heavenly Dao, this is the only power that surpasses the starry sky. Whoever can completely grasp the power of the heavenly Dao will be the king of this starry sky. A complicated look appeared in Elder Heartless' eyes as he muttered in a low voice, his tone filled with yearning. A cultivator who ascends 9 times in the void can completely grasp the heavenly Dao, right? Zhuowen asked doubtfully. Elder Heartless sneered, 9 times in the void? You're thinking too much. 9 times in the void is still far from it. To me, 9 times in the void is just a superficial understanding of the power of the heavenly Dao. Those who can truly grasp the heavenly Dao are legendary experts who have broken through the heavens. However, those experts are too far away from us. There are countless geniuses in the 8 heavens, but how many cultivators can reach 9 times in the void? And the lords of the heavens whose strength surpasses ordinary 9 times in the void do not understand the true heavenly Dao at all. The true heavenly Dao is actually only understood by the legendary experts who have broken through the heavens. Only the experts who have broken through the heavens can truly break through this shackle-like starry sky. Zhuowen silently listened to Elder Heartless' rueful words, but his heart sank into silence. The heavenly Tao was a power that Zhuowen had only come into contact with recently. If he had not obtained the blood of the heavenly Tao, he would not even know what the heavenly Tao was. Of course, even if he knew the existence of the heavenly Tao now, he still did not know what the heavenly Tao was. Breaking through the heavens? Zhuowen also murmured in a low voice. He was also filled with yearning for that legendary cultivation level. All right, the heavenly Tao contract has been set. You can go and bring the blood of the heavenly Tao for me to see. If you don't have the blood of the heavenly Tao, then it'll be considered as you breaking the contract. At that time, the hand of the heavenly Tao will tear you to pieces, Elder Heartless said calmly. Zhuowen nodded, and sent the black-robed Zhuowen into the black hole. After about half a day, the black-robed Zhuowen returned. He held an unremarkable white jade box in his hand. Zhuowen threw the white jade box to Old Man Wu Qing, and said, "This is the blood of heavenly Tao. Take a look for yourself." Old Man Wu Qing received the heavenly blood and opened it. Immediately, an aura as vast as the ocean surged out, firmly suppressing Old Man Wu Qing. Old Man Wu Qing's eyes shone brightly as he curled his lips. It really is the blood of the heavenly Tao. Moreover, if I'm not wrong, this is Luotian's blood of the heavenly Tao. Zhuowen nodded non-committally and said, "I got the heavenly blood from the waxing, and waning moons. According to the agreement, you can only refer to the heavenly blood's texture rules and have no right to use it." Old Man Wu Qing waved his hand and said somewhat impatiently, "Don't worry. Since we've already established a heavenly Tao contract, I have no intention of going back on my word." After saying that, Old Man Wu Qing took the white jade box and entered the small bamboo house. When he closed the small bamboo house, Old Man Wu Qing said, "Don't disturb me if there's nothing important. Wait for me to comprehend the heavenly blood. When I'm satisfied, I'll come out of seclusion. Also, I see that your talent in array Tao is not bad. There's a cave in the waterfall, and there are many array patterns carved on the cave walls. Those things are useful to you. In short, don't bother me if there's nothing important." After saying that, Old Man Wu Qing fiercely closed the door of the small bamboo house. After Zhuowen's divine sense silently probed the small and ordinary bamboo house, he was shocked to discover that the surface of the small bamboo house was covered in numerous obscure spirit formations, and these spirit formations were much more formidable than the grand formations he'd encountered in the gorge when he first entered. Zhuowen knew that even if Old Man Wu Qing was not a level 9 divine array master, he was probably not far away. Thinking of this, Zhuowen's eyes became more and more excited. He immediately said something to the king spirit, and the two of them arrived in front of the waterfall. "Master, are you so assured that Old Man Wu Qing will take the heavenly blood? If he secretly uses it and advances to the void sky 9 steps, I'm afraid he won't be afraid of the heavenly Tao, right?" the king spirit asked worriedly. Zhuowen shook his head and said, "King spirit, the terror of the heavenly Tao is beyond our imagination. That Old Man Wu Qing won't break the contract so easily." Zhuowen couldn't help but think of the fear in Old Man Wu Qing's eyes when the heavenly Tao hand appeared. Although he didn't know much about the heavenly Tao, he knew that Old Man Wu Qing's expression wouldn't be fake. Without a doubt, Old Man Wu Qing was really afraid of the heavenly Tao. That was why Zhuowen was so assured to give the heavenly Tao blood to Old Man Wu Qing. The king spirit nodded silently and didn't say anything else. "Wait for me outside. I'll go inside the waterfall and take a look." Zhuowen instructed as he leaped into the waterfall. The moment he entered the waterfall, Zhuowen immediately found a deep cave. After stepping into the cave, Zhuowen took out a luminous stone from his spirit ring. An oily green light spread out, illuminating the cave. Zhuowen casually looked at the rock wall beside him, and his gaze immediately became serious. He saw that there was indeed a rather complicated array drawn on the rock wall. Below the array pattern, there were densely packed small words. They were actually introducing the names and principles of these arrays, and they were extremely detailed. Zhuowen slowly went deeper and found that the rock walls along the way were actually filled with similar arrays. The deeper he went, the more complicated the arrays were, and they all had corresponding introductions. Chapter 2120. Nirvana Rebirth. At the end of the cave, there was an open space that was neither big nor small. In the middle of the open space stood a stone tablet. Zhuowen's gaze fell on the stone tablet, and his expression was filled with shock. There was also a formation inscribed on the surface of the stone tablet. However, the complexity of this formation far exceeded the scope of Zhuowen's understanding. Zhuowen had seen many formations along the way in the cave, and there were even many level 8 formations carved on the walls. However, none of them could compare to the terrifying formation carved on the stone tablet in front of him. A level 9 formation. Zhuowen's gaze became extremely solemn. It was not that he had never seen level 8 formations before. Even if it was a top-notch level 8 formation, although he might not be able to break it, he could at least understand it. However, he could not understand the formation carved on the stone tablet in front of him at all. Apart from the level 9 formation, Zhuowen could not think of any other formation that was so terrifying. I really didn't expect that there would be a stone tablet with a level 9 formation carved on it. It's really unbelievable. Zhuowen's eyes were filled with excitement. At the same time, he also knew why old Wuqing's formation skills were so terrifying. It should be because of this stone tablet in the cave. To be able to refer to the principles of level 9 formations was such a blessing and important thing for a formation godmaster. As long as one's comprehension was not too bad, through the imitation and learning of level 9 formations, the standard of a formation godmaster would not be too bad. Zhuowen suppressed the excitement in his heart. He did not immediately comprehend the level 9 formation on the stone tablet. Instead, he returned to the entrance of the cave. He planned to start from the first formation diagram on the wall of the cave entrance. He vaguely felt that the formation on the stone tablet had an unusual connection with the other formations in the cave. If he were to immediately study the array on the stone tablet, he was afraid that he would be at a loss. However, if he were to study the basic array diagrams on the rock wall, he might be able to find some kind of pattern from the simple to the complicated. Of course, if Zhuowen wanted to immediately comprehend the level 9 array on the stone tablet, he could do so deliberately. However, Zhuowen knew that he might not be able to understand the level 9 array even if he took the time to study it. If you can't even understand it, how can you talk about research? Thus, Zhuowen began to slowly study the array diagram from the entrance of the cave. In the blink of an eye, 5 years had passed. Zhuowen had been studying the array diagrams in the cave. At the same time, he was constantly deducing and comparing them. His level of array Dao had also improved imperceptibly. On this day, Zhuowen stood in front of the stone tablet at the end of the cave. The corners of his mouth curled up slightly as he muttered softly, "After 5 years, I've finally thoroughly studied all the diagrams on the walls of the cave." Zhuowen's eyes were full of confidence. He said in a low voice, "I guessed right. The level 9 grand formation on this stone tablet is more or less related to the many formations on the rock wall." After studying the complicated formations on the rock wall for 5 years, Zhuowen already knew those formations like the back of his hand. Now that he had come to this place again, his gaze landed on the level 9 great array on the stone tablet. He discovered that the great array on the stone tablet did not give him the same cryptic feeling that he had at the beginning. Instead, it gave him a familiar feeling. Zhuowen knew that this was the result of his level of array Dao improving imperceptibly. Of course, apart from this, he also discovered that the level 9 grand formation was actually inseparably related to the complicated diagrams on the rock wall. In other words, the formations on the diagrams were actually a part of the level 9 grand formation. It was just that someone had separated it into individual formations. Zhuowen knew that the person who could separate the level 9 grand formation into independent formations was probably not the master who drew the level 9 grand formation on the stone tablet, but old Wuqing, who was comprehending the level 9 grand formation. No wonder old Wuqing wanted me to enter here. It seems like he wanted me to comprehend these formations and gain more inspiration from them. Zhuowen lowered his head and muttered to himself. His eyes revealed a hint of understanding. Zhuowen suddenly frowned slightly. Soon after, He revealed an expression of wild joy and his breathing became much more hurried. Chen Shui, Zhuowen muttered in a low voice before taking out a crystal coffin from his spirit ring. Inside the crystal coffin, there was a beautiful woman quietly lying there. This woman was Mu Chenshui. At this moment, the sun and moon grass on Mu Chenshui's chest emitted a gentle white light. Then, the white light entered Mu Chenshui's body. The white light faded and the sun and moon grass gradually withered, finally withering completely. At the same time, Mu Chenshui's delicate body, who was lying in the crystal coffin, began to emit a blazing white light. Moreover, this white light became more and more dazzling. Within this white light, there was a burning flame. Zhuowen looked at this white light and his eyes revealed a terrifying glow. He muttered in a low voice, "Phoenix body, Nirvana rebirth?" Back then, Mu Chenshui had the Phoenix bloodline. The most important talent of the Phoenix was Nirvana rebirth. It was said that after the Phoenix Nirvana rebirth, it would be reborn and reach a higher realm. When Mu Chenshui fell into a deep sleep, she was in the pilgrimage realm. Now that Mu Chenshui had Nirvana rebirth, her realm would take a large step forward. Catcher. Countless cracks appeared on the surface of the crystal coffin. In the end, because it could not withstand the terrifying flames inside the coffin, it collapsed into countless pieces. The surging flames transformed into a giant phoenix phantom. Then, it carried Mu Chenshui and rushed out of the cave. It flew out of the waterfall and floated above the valley. The king's spirit slowly raised his head and looked at the phoenix phantom that had suddenly appeared with a confused gaze. Although the phoenix phantom looked powerful, to the king's spirit, it was pitifully weak. The king's spirit only needed to wave his hand to crush it. Master. Not long after the phoenix phantom appeared, the emperor's spirit noticed Zhuowen, who was following closely behind, and bowed respectfully. Zhuowen nodded. Soon after, he landed not far away from the phoenix silhouette. His gaze was gentle as he looked at the stunning woman wrapped in phoenix flames. The phoenix Nirvana rebirth needs the most energy. The stronger the energy, the stronger your little girlfriend will be after her Nirvana rebirth. The thunder fire sword flew out of the ring. Blackie sat on the hilt of the sword, looking lazy. Xiao Hei had taken a lot of resources from the Luo God Palace. Her strength was not any weaker than Zhuowen's. There was also Xiao Hei's henchman, the Blood Immortal. She had also taken advantage of Xiao Hei and her strength had increased a lot. Your little girlfriend has been asleep for too long. Her strength is really weak. She can use the Nirvana rebirth to increase her strength in a short period of time. You have a lot of resources on you, so don't be stingy, Xiao Hei teased. Of course not. Zhuowen's lips curled up. He immediately flew not far away from the Phoenix Phantom. At this moment, the Phoenix Phantom continued to cry. Its voice was filled with excitement. Mu Chenshui, who was inside, still had her eyes closed. However, Zhuowen could clearly feel that Mu Chenshui's life force was growing stronger and stronger. Chen Shui, Zhuowen called out softly. From the spirit ring, he poured out piles of resources. However, Zhuowen did not pour all the resources in at once. Instead, he put the resources into the phoenix flames step by step. When the resources were used up, he put in the next wave of resources. The phoenix phantom was still too weak. On the other hand, most of the resources on Zhuowen's body were of the highest quality and high level. There were even some herbs that had an aura that was stronger than the phoenix phantom. If he poured all the resources in, he would not be saving Mu Chenshui. Instead, he would be harming Mu Chenshui. At that time, the Phoenix Phantom would be crushed by the resources before it could be reborn. In the beginning, Zhuowen had put in the lowest grade of divine medicine and resources. The Phoenix Phantom had barely absorbed them. If it weren't for Zhuowen's help, the Phoenix Phantom would have had a hard time absorbing them all. However, after absorbing the lowest level of divine medicine, the Phoenix Phantom began to emit even more intense flames. Even the aura of the Phoenix Phantom had become much stronger. At this moment, the door of the small bamboo house was slowly opened. Old man Wuching walked out while cursing. "Which bird is it? Why are you so noisy so early in the morning? Do you believe that I won't stew you to nourish my body?" Old Man Wuching noticed the phoenix phantom in the sky and his eyes became even more furious. However, when he saw Zhuowen carefully throw the divine herbs into the phoenix phantom, he calmed down. So it's a little girl. This little girl's realm is too low. Moreover, she seems to have the phoenix bloodline. However, this kind of low-level origin beast can't even compare to the lowest-level giant star beast. This Nirvana rebirth is very interesting. Old Man Wuching had his hands behind his back as his eyes revealed a look of interest. He didn't like the phoenix bloodline and he didn't like Mu Chunxue even more. He wanted to see how many resources Zhuowen would spend on this girl. In Old Man Wuching's opinion, this girl would be reborn after Nirvana rebirth. The quality of her foundation and aptitude would depend on the process of Nirvana rebirth. Of course, Old Man Wuching felt that wasting too many good resources on a woman was a very foolish action. Therefore, when he saw Zhuowen take out some low-level divine herbs, he felt that it was very normal. Hey! This kid even took out a level 3 divine herb? Isn't it a bit wasteful to use it on this little girl? Old Man Wuching suddenly exclaimed softly. His gaze landed on Zhuowen's hand. He was holding a 7-colored grass in his palm. The 7 colors were constantly alternating, looking gorgeous and dazzling. Chapter 21-21. Awakening. As time continued to pass, Old Man Wuching was shocked to discover that Zhuowen was actually taking out even more precious divine medicines. Level 4, Level 5, and even Level 6 divine medicines, all of which he threw into the Phoenix Phantom. Is this kid crazy? He's throwing Level 6 divine herbs in just like that. Old Man Wuching felt his heart ache. Although he also had Level 6 divine herbs, Zhuowen had not taken out one. He had taken out dozens or even nearly 100 of them. That was a lot more than he had. Although Old Man Wuching's cultivation was very high and he was quite rich, he was still much weaker than the Luotian Palace. If he were to take out so many Level 6 divine herbs, he could grit his teeth and take them out. However, if he were to take them out to help a woman increase her cultivation, he wouldn't do so. Even if this woman was Old Man Wuching's closest lover, Old Man Wuching wouldn't do so because he felt that it was too stupid. However, Zhuowen was different. Mu Chunxue was his wife and the person he loved the most. Moreover, Mu Chunxue's coma had a lot to do with Zhuowen. Even if Zhuowen risked his life, he would save Mu Chunxue and raise Mu Chunxue's cultivation at all costs. Nirvana rebirth was the most important moment for Mu Chunxue to obtain a new life. Zhuowen would naturally do his best to make the reborn Mu Chunxue even more perfect and powerful. Thinking of this, Zhuowen's eyes revealed a determined look. He immediately took out more than 10 crystal clear divine herbs from his spirit ring. F***CK. Isn't this a level 7 divine herb? This kid is really crazy. He put more than 10 level 7 divine herbs in. This. Old Man Wuching didn't know what to say. He only felt a faint pain in his heart. It was as if the dozen or so level 7 divine herbs were his, but he saw the level 7 divine herbs that belonged to him being eaten by a dog. His current mood was more or less like this. Just as Old Man Wuching was about to scold Zhuowen for being a spendthrift, Zhuowen took out another 10 stalks of godly medicine. The medicinal effects of these 10 stalks of divine medicine were truly too dense. They actually transformed into countless grand scenes in the sky. There were innumerable bejeweled palaces and jade palaces. Old Man Wuching's face was flushed red, but he couldn't say anything. Or rather, he didn't know what to say now. The 10 stalks of divine medicine that Zhuowen had taken out were not level 7 divine medicine, but the higher level 8 divine medicine. This had truly shocked the Old Man Wuching. This brat is really ruthless. He even took out level 8 divine herbs, and 10 of them at once. This courage. After saying that, the pain on Old Man Wuching's face deepened. He continued, level 9 divine medicine is extremely precious. This kid probably doesn't have it. Even if he did, he probably wouldn't be willing to take it out. Unfortunately, just as Old Man Wuching finished speaking, Zhuowen's next move slapped him hard in the face. Zhuowen carefully took out a glowing flower from his spirit ring. The petals of this flower were completely composed of halos. It looked dreamy and dazzling. Level 9 divine medicine, aurora flower. Not far away, the king spirit's lips moved as he spat out these few words with difficulty. Then, he was completely stunned. Old man Wu Qing sucked in a breath of cold air. His gaze became numb. Although he really wanted to scold Zhuowen, he realized that he couldn't. After all, these divine medicines weren't his own. They were Zhuowen's. He really didn't have the right to say anything. The instant the aurora flower was thrown into the phoenix phantom by Zhuowen, the flames within the phoenix phantom suddenly erupted and soared into the sky, dyeing the entire valley's horizon a fiery red. It looked strange and gorgeous. Moreover, these flames burned more and more fiercely, as if they were going to burn the entire sky into nothingness. The terrifying high temperature actually caused the surrounding starry sky to distort. It looked extremely terrifying. Nirvana rebirth can reach such power. I've never seen it before. Old man Wu Qing muttered in a low voice. However, when he thought about how Zhuowen had directly put in the level 9 divine medicine, he felt relieved. However, he wanted to curse even more. The resources that Zhuowen had thrown into the phoenix shadow were equivalent to 2/3 of old man Wu Qing's foundation. It was too terrifying. A loud phoenix cry was heard. It pierced through gold and stone, pierced through the starry sky, distorted space, and shattered heaven and earth. A majestic aura swept out in all directions like a storm. Zhuowen's pupils constricted. Then, he was involuntarily pushed back thousands of meters by this powerful aura. His gaze was extremely solemn as he looked at Mu Chunxue, who was in the sky burning flames. The flames around Mu Chunxue gradually transformed from fiery red to golden yellow. Finally, they completely transformed into a golden color. They looked noble and extraordinary. Soon after, the golden flames that enveloped Mu Chunxue absorbed all the surrounding flames and turned into a gigantic fire phoenix that covered the sky as it soared into the sky. The giant phoenix continued to circle in the sky. Then, it slowly entered Mu Chunxue's body. The instant the entire fire phoenix entered Mu Chunxue's body, a golden fire phoenix mark appeared between her snow-white brows. "Chen Shui!" Zhuowen shouted out. His voice was filled with excitement and anticipation. Perhaps it was because she heard Zhuowen's voice, but the beautiful woman floating in the sky slowly moved her eyelids. It was as if she was struggling to open her eyelids. Mu Chunxue slowly fell down. Zhuowen took a step forward and reached out his right hand to grab her waist. He leaned against her ear and kept calling out Mu Chunxue's name, like the whispers between lovers. Xiao He, who was sitting on the thunder flame sword's hilt, had a sad look in his eyes. The others did not know about the matter between Zhuowen and Mu Chunxue. Only he knew about it clearly. The scene of the past, when he saw Zhuowen holding Mu Chunxue, kept replaying in Xiao He's mind. It's hard for men and women to be close friends. I hope all the lovers in the world can be together. Xiao He could not help but sigh softly. There was a trace of sadness and melancholy in his heart. Wu, sir is so refined. This poem is so well written. This little one cannot help but cry. The blood immortal sword was floating not far away from Xiao He. She was wiping her tears while praising Xiao He. Scram to the side. Father is not in the mood to listen to your flattery today. Xiao He sent the blood immortal flying with a kick. His eyes were filled with melancholy as he looked at the young couple who had finally reunited. As Zhuowen kept calling out in a low voice, Mu Chunxue's eyelids kept twitching. Her beautiful eyelashes kept moving up and down, giving off a kind of charming charm. Finally, Mu Chunxue's eyelids stopped twitching. She slowly opened her eyes and what entered her eyes was a familiar face. Shua. When? Mu Chunxue's delicate body trembled. Her beautiful eyes were filled with mist. She raised her jade-like hands and held Zhuowen's face. She said in a soft voice, Zhuowen, it's really you. I thought I would never see you again. Now that I've seen you, am I dreaming? Zhuowen held Mu Chunxue and landed on top of the waterfall. His lips revealed a bright smile, but his eyes were filled with tears. Chen Shui, you're not dreaming, everything is real. You're real and I'm real. Everything around us is real. You've already woken up, I won't let you leave me again. Zhuowen was filled with tears of joy. His words were incoherent and he even stuttered a bit. Mu Chunxue looked around. After confirming that everything was real, she hugged Zhuowen and said with a smile, "It's not a dream, it's really not a dream. You've appeared in front of me again." The two of them hugged each other for a long time, as if they wanted to fuse into each other's bodies. Woo, woo, woo. This is too moving. The lovers are finally together. I'm so moved. Ari, sir, don't hit me. I'm really moved. I'm not flattering you. I'm just expressing my true feelings. Aya, it hurts. Sir, I'm not flattering you. The blood immortal who had been sent flying by Xiao Hei's kick once again arrived near Xiao Hei. She was filled with tears and snot as she spoke. It was a pity that all she got was a beating from Xiao Hei. What followed was the blood immortal's pitiful cries that sounded like a pig being slaughtered. How boring. 9th level divine medicine, so many precious divine medicines. Wasting them on a woman like this, it's not worth it at all. Old man Wu Qing curled his lips. He sat down on the stone bench in front of the little bamboo house and poured a pot of tea. His lips were filled with disdain. The king spirit stood on the side with a strange look in his eyes. He really did not know about Mu Chunxue's existence at all. Zhuowen had never even mentioned her before. However, this was Zhuowen's private matter. The king spirit was just Zhuowen's servant. He had no right to ask about Zhuowen's private matters. This little girl is quite lucky. She just happened to be reborn at the same time as Zhuowen. With so many level 9 divine medicines and so many divine medicines, this little girl's cultivation has transformed really quickly. She actually reached 1-step virtual sky. Sitting on the thunder fire sword, Blackie clicked his tongue in wonder and continued, "Moreover, with the Nirvana rebirth, this little girl's talent is even stronger than before. As long as there are enough resources, it shouldn't be difficult for her to catch up to Zhuowen." Chapter 21-22. The four great islands Zhuowen and Mu Chunxue cuddled for a while before pulling Mu Chunxue into the valley. He smiled as he introduced the Emperor Spirit and Old Man Wuqing to her. Mu Chunxue was especially shocked when she heard that Old Man Wuqing and the Emperor Spirit were both in the Void Sky 8 Steps realm. Mu Chunxue had just woken up. Although she was very vague about the realms after the Pilgrimage realm, she was clear about many things after Zhuowen's introduction. After the Pilgrimage realm was the Deity Transformation realm, and after the Deity Transformation realm was the Virtual Sky world. Above the Virtual Sky world was the Heaven-breaking realm. It was said that there had never been a heaven-breaking realm cultivator in the 8 heavenly domains. The master of a heavenly domain was considered the pinnacle existence in this galaxy. The master of a heavenly domain was only at the Void Sky 9 Steps realm. It could be said that those who reached the Void Sky 8 Steps realm were the pinnacle figures in this galaxy. Mu Chunxue also knew about Zhuowen's realm. He was only at the Void Sky 4 Steps realm, but he actually knew such a powerful cultivator. In particular, the Emperor Spirit actually addressed Zhuowen as master. This made Mu Chunxue shocked, but more than that, she was delighted. She knew that with such a powerful servant, there was no need to worry about Zhuowen's safety. "Little girl, do you still remember this dragon lord?" Xiao Hei licked his lips and immediately approached Mu Chunxue, asking with a smile. Mu Chunxue's beautiful eyes turned slightly, and fell on Xiao Hei. A charming smile appeared on her face as she said, "Xiao Hei, how could I not remember?" Xiao Hei chuckled, and said, "You guys can be considered to have cultivated to a positive result. It wasn't easy, brat, this little girl is really good to you. You have to treat her well in the future." Mu Chunxue's beautiful eyes were as gentle as water as she looked at Zhuowen beside her. Zhuowen laughed and hugged Mu Chunxue's slender waist. "Do I need you to tell me that?" Mu Chunxue rolled her eyes at Zhuowen. Her graceful bearing and poise had a unique charm to it. Even Zhuowen was a little dazed by her. Hey, can the two of you stop showing off your affection? This old man can't take it anymore." Old Man Wuqing, who was sitting on the stone bench, picked up a cup of tea and drank it in one gulp as he grumbled in dissatisfaction. Zhuowen shrugged, not minding Elder Wuqing's rude attitude. Instead, He looked apologetically at Mu Chunxue. Husband, you should go. Didn't you just tell me that you have something to discuss with this senior? Mu Chunxue said softly. She stretched out her slender jade-like hands and gently tidied up Zhuowen's messy collar, like a virtuous little wife. Zhuowen fiercely kissed Mu Chunxue's fragrant lips and said, Chen Shui, you've just been reborn and haven't consolidated your realm yet. I'll have Xiao He help you consolidate your virtual sky realm. Don't worry, you can rest assured when this dragon master does things. Xiao He patted his chest and said arrogantly. Zhuowen exhorted a few more times. Finally, under the impatient urging of old man Wuqing, he reluctantly sat down opposite old man Wuqing. What a waste. Brat, you spent so many divine medicines on a woman, it's really not worth it. Why don't you exchange with this old man? As soon as Zhuowen sat down, old man Wuqing began to chatter. Of course, the topic always revolved around Zhuowen's prodigal actions. Zhuowen said indifferently, Senior, I'm not you, so I didn't do that. Divine medicines are precious and important, but in my heart, my wife is more important than everything. Old man Wuqing's face stiffened. Looking at Zhuowen's serious and even cold expression, he knew that Zhuowen was not joking. Pursing his lips, old man Wuqing did not linger on this topic for too long. Instead, he took out a white jade box from his sleeve and threw it to Zhuowen. This is the blood of the heavenly Tao. In these 5 years, although I haven't advanced to the 9th step of the virtual sky realm, I've benefited greatly. Zhuowen took the white jade box and looked at old man Wuqing in surprise. 5 years is enough. Old man Wuqing nodded and said, I've completely understood the heavenly Tao patterns. It's useless to look at them any longer. Whether I can advance to the 9th step of the virtual sky realm will depend on myself. Zhuowen nodded and put away the blood of the heavenly Tao. The blood of the heavenly Tao was extremely important to him. Once his cultivation attained the 8th step of the virtual sky realm, he intended to utilize the blood of the heavenly Tao. Even though he'd made an agreement with the Tao Defiance that he couldn't utilize the blood of the heavenly Tao. However, the Tao Defiance had broken the agreement, so the agreement was naturally null and void. Moreover, the Tao Defiance weren't born from the blood of the heavenly Tao, so Zhuowen utilizing the blood of the heavenly Tao wouldn't affect the Tao Defiance at all. Presently, his cultivation was still too low, so utilizing the blood of the heavenly Tao too early would only be harmful to him. Old man Wuqing spoke indifferently, I'll only protect you for 5 years. Make the best use of it. Zhuowen nodded and continued, then I'm about to leave. Senior, come with me. Old man Wuqing nodded and didn't speak any further. After they packed up, they left the abode under old man Wuqing's guidance. Use this flying ship of mine. The magnetic field here is extremely terrifying, and ordinary flying ships are easily destroyed here. After they left the abode, they were greeted by the extremely terrifying magnetic field. Old man Wuqing spoke a few words before he withdrew a flying ship from his sleeve. The flying ship wasn't large, and it had a streamlined shape. It was rather beautiful. Zhuowen held Mu Chunxue's hand as they entered the cabin. The king's spirit followed behind Zhuowen like a loyal guard. Once everyone was seated, old man Wuqing, who sat in the control room at the front, immediately activated the flying ship. Swoosh! 8 terrifying rays of blue light shot out from the rear of the flying ship, and then the flying ship vanished on the spot as if it had teleported. So fast. Mu Chunxue couldn't help but exclaim as she gazed at the stars outside the cabin. They were practically unable to see the scenery of the stars clearly. Zhuowen nodded to himself as well. Old man Wuqing's flying ship was countless times faster than the god Lu. The 2 flying ships weren't on the same level at all. Zhuowen rubbed his chin while he pondered in his heart. Should I ask old man Wuqing for a flying ship like this? Dub City. Surrounded by stars, it was magnificent. Ever since it was surrounded by the Ziwei Galaxy, the development of Dub City had been like a blowout. Its development speed had reached an unimaginable level. Especially the many forces around Dub City, all of them had joined Dub City. In the far west, there weren't many life planets at all. There were only pieces of cold meteorites. Whether it was the scenery or the comfort, It was many times worse than a life planet. If there were life planets, why would these cultivators still live on the meteorites where birds don't shit? At this moment, inside Dub City, at the top of a huge tower, a group of Riker higher-ups were having an emergency meeting. This meeting was led by Long Xiaotian, Feng Xiao, and Lu Hantian, and the atmosphere in the meeting was extremely solemn. Hantian, Senior Do Xian hasn't come out of seclusion yet? Long Xiaotian looked at Lu Hantian and asked. Lu Hantian revealed a bitter smile and said, "Not yet. Although I really want to enter the place where Senior Do Xian is in seclusion, unfortunately, the restrictions there are too strong. I can't go in at all." Long Xiaotian frowned and sighed. What should we do? Wen'er has been gone for 5 years without any news. At this juncture, even Senior Do Xian hasn't come out of seclusion. Xiaotian, we still have 2 days. Didn't those people give us 2 days to consider? Feng Xiao said. Sigh. We really miscalculated. In such a barren place like the Far West, the attraction of a life planet can be imagined. Moreover, Dub City has a whole galaxy of life planets. We shouldn't have been so anxious to publicize it. Long Xiaotian said helplessly. We also didn't know that the 4 island masters in the Myriad Magnetic Sea would actually join forces to shamelessly snatch our Dub City. They actually want us to completely move all the people of Dub City away within 2 days. It's really too hateful. Lu Hantian's eyes were gloomy and his fists were clenched. There were 4 most powerful forces in the Myriad Magnet Sea, namely Shuangcheng Island, Taibin Island, Changsheng Island, and Jingshan Island. The forces of the 4 great islands far exceeded the original Dub City, and the 4 great island masters were all powerhouses of the Void Sky 7th level. After 5 years of development, Dub City was actually very large. Compared with the forces of any of the 4 great islands, it was not much worse. However, now that the 4 great islands had joined forces, and Dub City's high-end combat power was still much weaker than the 4 great islands, it was really not a match for the 4 great islands at present. It was precisely because of the great disparity in forces that Dub City did not act rashly. If they really fought, Dub City would lose without a doubt. My lord, not good, the people of the 4 great islands have already arrived. Suddenly, outside the conference hall, a soldier in armor hurriedly ran in, his face full of panic. What? The people of the 4 great islands are here? Didn't they say that they would give us 3 days to consider? It's only been a day now, why are they here? Lu Hantian's face changed slightly. The soldier knelt on the ground, his entire body trembling with fear. Go, let's go out and take a look. Long Xiaotian's face was gloomy as he led everyone out of the conference hall. At this moment, in the starry sky outside Dub City, densely packed flying ships surrounded Dub City. It looked quite hair-raising. In front of the countless fleets, 4 figures with extremely terrifying auras floated quietly, overlooking Dub City that was surrounded by countless planets. A planet of life. I really didn't expect that after millions of years, I could still see a planet of life with such a strong life aura in the land of the Far West. Chapter 21-23. Supreme Glorious Sun Blade. I want 1/3 of the vital planets in Dub City. I don't think the 3 of you have any objections, right? The enchanting woman opened her charming eyes and looked at the other 3 with a charming smile. She didn't care about their ugly expressions at all. Lu Manfeng, isn't your appetite too big? A middle-aged man with a cold expression said coldly. Island Master Cow, are you not convinced? Then how many vital planets do you think this little girl should want? The enchanting woman Lu Manfeng's smile became more and more intense, but the coldness also became more and more obvious. For a moment, the atmosphere between the 2 became much more solemn and sharp. All right, the 2 of you stop messing around. We haven't taken Dub City yet. Instead, we're fighting among ourselves. An old man in his 60s wearing a long robe landed between Lu Manfeng and Cao Tairan with a headache and shouted in a deep voice. Most of the cultivators in the Myriad Magnetic Sea recognized the 4 people standing in front of the fleet. The enchanting woman was Jingshan Island's island master, Lu Manfeng. The middle-aged man arguing with the enchanting woman was Shuangcheng Island's island master, Cao Tairan. The old man in his 60s wearing a long robe was Chongxiong Island's island master, Zhong Zhicheng. As for the remaining person, he was a silent man in his 30s wearing a black robe. This person was Taibin Island's island master, Song Binhong. Zhong Zhicheng's persuasion obviously had some effect. Lu Manfeng and Cao Tairan snorted coldly and stopped arguing. Whoosh! Whoosh! At this moment, several figures flew out from Dub City. The leaders were Long Xiaotian, Feng Shiyao, and Lu Hantian. Yun Chuyu, Yin Bingyun, and Hong Shan were also among them. The four of you, what's going on? Didn't you say you would give us 3 days to think about it? Long Xiaotian said with a gloomy face. Cao Tairan sneered. Giving you 1 day to think about it is already the greatest kindness to you. You actually want 3 days? Are you courting death? Lu Hantian was furious, but he was stopped by Long Xiaotian. Island Master Zhong, what's going on? You have to give me an explanation, Long Xiaotian said as he looked at the old man. Zhong Zhicheng coughed lightly and said indifferently, it's like this. The other 3 can't wait, so I can only give you 1 day. How about this, you move away immediately, and we won't hurt anyone in Dub City. Elder Zhong, why are you being so courteous with these people? Just kill them all. The 4 of us can divide the vital planet of Heavenly Pivot City equally. Why bother? Cao Tairan said disapprovingly. The expressions of Long Xiaotian and the others changed slightly, and they glared at Cao Tairan. This Cao Tairan was really too detestable. He was actually so vicious. Zhong Zhicheng only looked at Long Xiaotian with a smile and said, City Lord Long, I think you are also a smart person. The patience of the 4 of us is very limited. If you want to drag this out, I might have to take Island Lord Cao's suggestion. Such an arrogant threat made Long Xiaotian furious, but he still suppressed his anger and said, give me half a day. Once half a day is over, we will move away. You don't know what's good for you. Half a day. I won't give you even a quarter of an hour. Due to Lu Manfeng, Cao Tairan had been suppressing a fire in his heart. Now that he saw Long Xiaotian still wanted to drag this out, he didn't hide his killing intent at all and rushed towards Long Xiaotian. Zhong Zhicheng and the others just watched silently. They didn't plan to stop Cao Tairan at all. Bastard! Long Xiaotian was trembling with anger. Lu Hantian even erupted with his aura, and the several people who came with him also used their own moves. Just a bunch of chickens and pottery dogs. Cao Tairan snorted coldly. He reached out with his right hand, and terrifying divine power surged out. It turned into a terrifying giant hand that was like the might of the heavens, and it suddenly crushed down. Bang! An ear-piercing explosion rang out. Long Xiaotian and the rest shuddered as they spat out a mouthful of blood. Subsequently, they retreated rapidly. However, Cao Tairan's attack had been neutralized as a result. Hey! You actually blocked my attack. Cao Tairan's eyes were filled with surprise as his gaze fell on Long Xiaotian's hand. He saw Long Xiaotian holding a dazzling golden saber that was like a scorching sun. This saber was too dazzling, and its aura was exceptionally powerful and terrifying. It was simply much more powerful than an ordinary Void Sky Divine artifact. This saber. It's not a Void Sky Divine artifact at all. Could it be a secondary Void Sky Divine artifact? Cao Tairan's gaze was fixed on the saber in Long Xiaotian's hand. This saber was the Supreme Glorious Sun Saber that Zhuoan had obtained from Yao Xiong. Although the Supreme Glorious Sun Saber wasn't a true secondary Void Sky Divine artifact, it was infinitely close. It was many times more powerful than Void Sky Divine artifacts. Back then, Yao Xiong had relied on the Supreme Glorious Sun Saber to fight against the peak 7th step Monarch Spirit. If it wasn't for the Heavenly Domain Starry Sky Essence, both sides would have been injured, and Yao Xiong wouldn't have died. Long Xiaotian's cultivation was only at the 2nd step of Void Sky. Although he had the Supreme Glorious Sun Saber, the gap between him and Cao Tairan was too great. Therefore, he was repelled in one move and even suffered heavy injuries. Not only Cao Tairan, but Lu Manfeng, Zhong Zhicheng, and Song Binhong, who were watching the battle from the side, also narrowed their eyes when they saw the extraordinary Supreme Glorious Sun Saber. Then, The three of them exchanged a glance and saw the burning desire in each other's eyes. Originally, the life planet in Heavenly Pivot City was enough for them to covet. But now, they didn't expect that Long Xiaotian actually had a secondary void sky divine artifact. It was a pleasant surprise. In an instant, the four of them were filled with murderous intent. As long as they killed Long Xiaotian, the supreme glorious sun saber would be theirs. Long Xiaotian's face was full of bitterness. He also felt the terrifying murderous intent from Cao Tairan and the other three. The supreme glorious sun saber was given to him by Zhuoan as a precaution. He had never thought of using it. However, Cao Tairan's attack was too terrifying. If he didn't use the supreme glorious sun saber, he would have died without a doubt. An ant like you doesn't deserve to have such a treasure. Hand it over. Cao Tairan was the first to rush out. His right hand formed a claw and grabbed at Long Xiaotian. This time, Cao Tairan used his full strength. The terrifying divine power formed a terrifying hurricane that swept out in all directions. Long Xiaotian's face changed drastically. Cao Tairan was really going for the kill this time. Even if Long Xiaotian had the supreme glorious sun saber, he would most likely be killed by Cao Tairan's attack. Xiaotian. Feng Xiao shouted and was about to rush over, but she was stopped by Lu Hantian. Boom! Cao Tairan's attack was too fast. It instantly fell in front of Long Xiaotian. Long Xiaotian only felt that his whole body was unable to move. The terrifying air pressure around him was constantly surging and gathering towards his limbs as if it was going to crush his whole body into powder. The shadow of death shrouded Long Xiaotian's entire body. Rumble. A figure quickly rushed over and blocked in front of Long Xiaotian. Then, the figure also threw out a punch and blasted on Cao Tairan's claw. Then, there was a dense explosion that resounded continuously in the starry sky. Bang! Cao Tairan's pupils shrank, and he could not help but retreat repeatedly. The figure was almost the same, also retreating repeatedly. However, in the process of retreating, he grabbed Long Xiaotian and brought him away. Long Xiaotian only felt his shoulder tighten, and then he flew back. When he stopped, the right hand that grabbed his shoulder loosened. Only then did he see the appearance of the person who saved him. This person was dressed in coarse clothes, with long white hair draped over his shoulders. He was an old man in his 70s. Senior Do Xian, you finally came out of seclusion, Long Xiaotian said with a light sigh. Do Xian nodded. He also knew that Long Xiaotian was Zhuoan's father, so his attitude did not dare to be too high and mighty. Brother Long, what's going on? Why did the four great island masters of the myriad magnetic sea come to our dub city? Do Xian asked in a deep voice. Long Xiaotian sighed softly and explained the matter in detail. Do Xian's face was gloomy. He looked at Cao Tairan, Zhong Ziqing, and said, "The four of you, aren't you too rude? These life planets have owners. What's the difference between you robbing and robbing like this?" Cao Tairan's gaze was solemn as he sized Do Xian up and down. He sneered and said, "I really didn't expect you to actually advance to the Void Sky 7th step. It seems that you had some opportunities." Zhong Ziqing chuckled and said, "City Lord Do, since you have also advanced to the Void Sky 7th step, then both sides take a step back. Hand over all the life planets in Dub City and the broadsword in this person's hand, and we won't make things difficult for you. How about it?" Do Xian narrowed his eyes and said coldly, "Sorry, I can't make the decision in Dub City now." "Are you kidding? Aren't you the City Lord of Dub City? Why can't you make the decision?" Lu Manfeng's beautiful eyes revealed a mocking look. Do Xian said indifferently, "Dub City has long been transferred to an expert by this Do. If the four of you want to live, you'd better retreat quickly. When that expert returns, the four of you will probably be in big trouble." Cao Tairan looked at Do Xian strangely and laughed loudly, saying, "What a joke. Your lie is too shallow. You actually want to deceive us? Ha ha." Zhong Ziqing also shook his head and said, "Do Xian, we don't intend to do anything to you, but you really don't know what you're talking about. You even used this kind of trick to deceive a 3-year-old child. Don't you feel ashamed?" Chapter 21-24. Rushing over, you sure talk a lot of nonsense. Cao Tairan snorted coldly and took the lead. He clenched his right hand into a fist and punched out. Sounds of air exploding could be heard. They were endless as they surged over, causing the surrounding starry sky to distort and collapse. Dou Xian's eyes were solemn as he transmitted his voice to Long Xiaotian. Brother Long, you guys go back to Dub City first. I've already arranged for people to activate the defensive formation. It was set up by Senior Zhuo and is quite powerful. Long Xiaotian nodded and tossed the Supreme Glorious Sun Saber to Dou Xian, saying, "This is the Supreme Glorious Sun Saber, take it first. These four are not easy to deal with, we can only rely on you." The moment Dou Xian held the Supreme Glorious Sun Blade, his eyes shone with a terrifying light. He muttered in a low voice, "This blade is so powerful. Could it be a secondary heaven-breaking divine artifact?" Cao Tairan was extremely fast. In an instant, he rushed over. The fist energy that could shatter any galaxy was like a vast and unparalleled mountain. It came crashing down and enveloped Dou Xian. When Dou Xian reacted, the fist energy was already very close. However, he was not afraid. His right hand gripped the hilt of the blade tightly, and then he lifted it gently. The blade of the blade suddenly flicked upward. Whoosh! An earth-shattering and terrifying blade energy flew out. Blazing golden light surrounded the blade energy. It was like a sun that had been magnified countless times. It rose slowly and was extremely fast. Rumble! Cao Tairan's fist energy was instantly shattered into nothingness by the blade energy. Cao Tairan's eyes narrowed. He stomped his right foot and retreated rapidly. However, the blade energy was too fast. It was like a maggot in one's bones. It arrived before Cao Tairan in an instant. Cao Tairan roared angrily. He took out a long black iron rod and swung it. Thousands of rod shadows burst out, layer upon layer, and formed a vast and boundless ocean. Bang! 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 The saber chi was extremely sharp. When it smashed onto the vast sea of shadows formed by the thousands of rod shadows, it actually smashed it into smithereens like a hot knife through butter. Cao Tairan's face was extremely ugly. The thousands of rod shadows were instantly destroyed. He retreated again. He swung the iron rod in his hand and smashed it heavily on the blade energy with the force of a mountain. Rumble! The saber chi was instantly broken, and Cao Tairan walked out with a gloomy expression. He never imagined that a mere strand of saber chi would actually put him in such a sorry state. It was truly detestable to the extreme. On the other hand, Dou Xian's face was filled with joy. The power of the Supreme Glorious Sun Saber was simply too powerful. Although he had just reached the Void Sky 7th step, he was confident that he could defeat an expert at the peak of the Void Sky 7th step with this saber. He might not be a match for an expert at the Void Sky 8th step. "Let's attack together," Cao Tairan said gloomily as he looked at Zhong Ziqing and the other two who were still watching the show. Lu Manfeng and Song Binhong both looked at Zhong Ziqing, obviously waiting for the latter to make the decision. Zhong Ziqing smiled faintly and said, "Make your move. Let's discuss the distribution of the saber after we get it." Lu Manfeng and Song Binhong nodded. Soon after, the three of them rushed out in a flash. Together with Cao Tairan, they rushed towards Dou Xian. "Haha, you're dead." Cao Tairan laughed heartily and followed Zhong Ziqing into the battle. Dou Xian's gaze became extremely solemn. Although his heart was filled with bitterness, he had no choice but to face it. Dub City was his territory after all. Although it was now Zhuowen's in name, he had already pledged allegiance to Zhuowen. Naturally, he could not give up this family property just like that. Dou Xian snorted coldly. With a twist of his right wrist, the Supreme Glorious Sun Saber suddenly shot out rays of terrifying saber light. Each ray of saber light was like a blazing sun, exceptionally dazzling and dazzling. Boom! 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 In an instant, Dou Xian's entire body was covered in dense saber light. It was as if he was surrounded by the sun. It was extremely terrifying. Zhong Ziqing and the other three took out their respective life void sky divine artifacts. At the same time, they used terrifying divine abilities and blasted out one after another. The 5 of them collided in an instant. Terrifying sounds of explosions reverberated continuously like the echoes of an empty valley. The aftermath of the battle was extremely terrifying. In the starry sky, dense invisible ripples erupted. These invisible ripples were like waves, spreading out in all directions. It looked extremely terrifying and dense. The fleet brought by the 4 island masters retreated one after another, not daring to get any closer. They knew very well that once they got close, even the flying ships and the cultivators on board would be finished. As for the area where Dub City was located, an extremely wide defensive array had already appeared. Long Xiaotian and the other cultivators of Dub City were all silently watching the battle between the 5 great experts. Everyone knew that the victory or defeat of this battle depended on the 5 great experts. Once one side was defeated, the other side would immediately lead their troops to attack. In this kind of battle, the role of the top experts was to dominate the overall situation. Therefore, the key to the battle was the success or failure of the 5 great experts. Dou Xian roared angrily. Holding the supreme glorious sun saber in his right hand, he suddenly spun it around his waist. A blazing halo extended out and exploded continuously. It was truly terrifying to listen to. Under the bombardment of this terrifying halo, Zhong Ziqing and the other 3 could not help but retreat dozens of steps. Die! Dou Xian's long hair fluttered as he instantly slashed out 4 times with the supreme glorious sun saber. Each slash was exceptionally terrifying as it swept towards Zhong Ziqing and the other 3 as if it could crush them into powder. Zhong Ziqing and the other 3 revealed solemn expressions as they used their respective Void Sky divine artifacts to block the incoming saber lights. Attack with all your might! Zhong Ziqing snorted coldly as he stabbed out with the blue longsword in his hand. This sword light condensed into a point that looked extremely sharp and terrifying. It cut through the starry sky and swept towards Dou Xian. Cao Tairan, Song Binhong, and Lu Manfeng nodded one after another and used their respective ultimate skills. For a time, Dou Xian was completely suppressed. Time passed slowly. Half a day had passed since the battle began. Bang! With a muffled groan, a figure flew out in a rather sorry state. Everyone in Dub City looked over. The moment they saw the figure clearly, their faces turned pale. This was because this figure was none other than Dou Xian. At this moment, Dou Xian's right hand clenched the supreme glorious sun saber tightly as his gaze became extremely solemn and unwilling. But soon, his expression changed drastically. He saw Zhong Ziqing's group of 4 rushing over, not giving Dou Xian the slightest chance to catch his breath. Dou Xian exerted all his strength and slashed out a saber attack, but it was blocked by Cao Tairan, Song Binhong, and Lu Manfeng's joint efforts. Zhong Ziqing took a step in the air and arrived in front of Dou Xian in an instant like a stream of light. At this moment, Dou Xian was already at the point of being a lamp without oil. The moment he saw Zhong Ziqing, he raised the supreme glorious sun saber with difficulty and slashed at Zhong Ziqing. Unfortunately, Zhong Ziqing twisted his wrist and the long sword in his hand swept out at a strange angle. It actually directly sent the supreme glorious sun saber in Dou Xian's hand flying. Zhong Ziqing slashed out again. The sword light pierced through Dou Xian's chest and exploded into a cloud of blood mist, while the latter flew out with a muffled groan. He only barely managed to stop his figure several tens of thousands of miles away. Fortunately, Zhong Ziqing's attention was no longer on Dou Xian. Otherwise, as long as Zhong Ziqing added another slash, Dou Xian's head would fall to the ground. It's still my first time seeing a secondary heaven-breaking divine artifact. This thing's power is really extraordinary. Zhong Ziqing took a step out and grabbed the supreme glorious sun saber, brandishing the saber with a blazing look in his eyes. Zhong Ziqing was naturally aware of Dou Xian's cultivation. He had just advanced to Void Sky 7th step. His realm had not even completely stabilized yet. Logically speaking, Dou Xian was not a match for any one of the 4 of them at all. But relying on this supreme glorious sun saber, he forcibly fought with the 4 of them for several hundred rounds before finally being defeated by them. It could be seen from this how extraordinary this supreme glorious sun saber was. You guys will regret it. Do Xian clutched his chest and growled with a ferocious look. But Zhong Ziqing laughed proudly and said, "Regret? You're joking with me, right?" Cao Tairan, Lu Manfeng, and Song Binhong rushed to Zhong Ziqing's side. They also looked at the supreme glorious sun saber in Zhong Ziqing's hand with blazing eyes. Zhong Ziqing naturally saw their movements. He smiled faintly and said, "The three of you, this saber belongs to me. I will do my best to compensate you. You also know that Changxiong Island is a treasure land. Haven't you always wanted Changxiong Island's Kanglan secret realm? I will give the three of you the opportunity to enter the secret realm as you wish. I will slowly compensate the three of you for other things." Cao Tairan and the other two looked at each other with hesitation. Zhong Ziqing was the strongest among the 4 island masters. His cultivation had already reached the peak of Void Sky 7th step. He was only half a step away from Void Sky 8th step. Now that Zhong Ziqing had the supreme glorious sun saber, the three of them had no chance of winning at all if they joined forces. The three of them had always wanted to enter Changxiong Island's Kanglan secret realm. It was said that the secret realm could greatly increase a cultivator's comprehension and had unimaginable benefits for cultivation breakthroughs. However, the Kanglan secret realm had always been hidden by Zhong Ziqing. Moreover, it was a forbidden area of Changxiong Island. Even the three of them had never entered it. This time, Zhong Ziqing even brought out the Kanglan secret realm. It was obvious that he was determined to obtain the supreme glorious sun saber. If they did not give him face, they would probably anger Zhong Ziqing. The end result would probably be very unpleasant. Island Master Zhong is the strongest. This saber should belong to you. However, Island Master Zhong, when the time comes, don't go back on your words. You should sign the contract first. Cao Tairan said in a deep voice. Lu Manfeng and Song Binhong did not say anything. They looked at Zhong Ziqing. Obviously, they had the same opinion as Cao Tairan. The corner of Zhong Ziqing's mouth curled up. He quickly signed the contract and said, "Do you believe me now?" Cao Tairan nodded. Then, his gaze fell on the injured Do Xian not far away. He smiled sinisterly and said, "This guy made me very embarrassed. The three of you don't have to do anything. Let me take care of him." As he spoke, Cao Tairan laughed sinisterly and rushed toward Do Xian with great momentum. Chapter 21-25. The unlucky Cao Tairan was caught off guard and was directly hit by the flying ship. With Cao Tairan's strength, a mere flying ship couldn't cause any harm to him. However, this flying ship that suddenly flew out was different. Not only was its surface as hard as iron, but the impact was so strong that it caused Cao Tairan to feel fear. Bang! Cao Tairan groaned and flew backwards in an extremely sorry state. He only managed to stop himself after flying 10,000 miles away. He looked at the flying ship that stopped in front of Do Xian in shock and anger. Zhong Ziqing, Lu Manfeng, and Song Binhong, who were watching from afar, were all shocked and their gazes became extremely serious. They naturally didn't care about a mere flying ship, but this flying ship that suddenly appeared in front of them was not ordinary. They had never seen a flying ship that could send an expert like Cao Tairan flying. "Sir, what do you mean by this? We don't seem to know you, right?" Cao Tairan's gaze was gloomy, but he didn't act rashly. Cao Tairan was very clear that this flying ship was very unusual. The owner of this flying ship was probably not a good person. He didn't want to offend an unknown expert. Cao Tairan was met with silence. However, the silence didn't last long. A young man in snow-white clothes slowly walked out of the flying ship's cabin door. The young man's right hand was holding the hand of a beautiful woman, but his eyes were filled with terrifying killing intent. 4th step in the void sky. Cao Tairan was stunned as he looked at the young man in snow-white clothes strangely. He didn't expect that the owner of this flying ship was only a cultivator who had reached the 4th step in the void sky. As for the beautiful woman beside the young man in white, Cao Tairan was stunned. However, the woman's cultivation was not high enough, only at the 1st step in the void sky. The cultivation of this man and woman was really low. In Cao Tairan's eyes, they were no different from ants. Senior Zhuo. The moment he saw the young man in snow-white clothes, Dou Xian's eyes lit up. He hurriedly came to Zhuowen's side, but his face was burning hot and he felt guilty. Zhuowen waved his hand and looked coldly at Cao Tairan, Zhong Ziqing, and the others. He asked, "What happened?" Dou Xian sighed softly and recounted the entire story. Zhuowen's eyes grew increasingly dark and cold. He even flew into a rage. He did not expect that the forces of the myriad magnetic sea's 4 great islands were actually so shameless, to actually want to snatch the life planet outside Dub City in public. It was seriously too much. Seeing the anger on Zhuowen's face, Dou Xian's heart trembled. He knew that the 4 great island masters had suffered. He didn't know how strong Zhuowen was, but he did know that the king spirit accompanying Zhuowen was no ordinary being. It was an elite with 8 levels of void sky. A king spirit could easily crush Zhong Ziqing and the others, even without the help of the supreme shining sun knife. It turns out that you're just a little brat with 4 levels of void sky. It's really rare to have such a hard flying ship. Obediently hand over this flying ship. Cao Tairan raised his eyes and said with his nostrils pointing to the sky. Zhuowen just smiled and said, "You've got guts, old man." Cao Tairan narrowed his eyes and said angrily, "Little bastard, you've got guts. How dare you insult this old man? Fine, this old man will teach you a lesson today." Saying that, Cao Tairan stepped on the air with his right foot and rushed straight towards Zhuowen like a flying shuttle. Zhuowen stood in place, but he was not afraid. Instead, there was a mocking look on his face. Cao Tairan naturally saw the mocking expression between Zhuowen's brows. Although he was surprised in his heart, he was even more furious. He, a dignified cultivator at the 7th step of the Void Sky Realm, had made a move against an ant at the 4th step of the Void Sky Realm like Zhuowen, so the latter ought to be trembling in fear. However, not only was Zhuowen not frightened, he even revealed such a mocking smile. How could he not be angry? Cao Tairan was extremely fast, and in an instant, he was in front of Zhuowen. Cao Tairan looked down at the young man in white in front of him. He stretched out his right hand and mercilessly punched Zhuowen's chest, wanting to turn him into dust. Pa. Unfortunately, at the instant Cao Tairan's fist had yet to hit Zhuowen, a large hand swept over at an even faster speed and fiercely slapped Cao Tairan. This slap was very heavy. It directly left a deep red palm print on Cao Tairan's right cheek, and Cao Tairan was sent flying backwards in a sorry state. Cao Tairan was stunned. He shook his head and roared angrily. Just as he was about to search for the culprit, a hand appeared on his left cheek like a ghost. Pa. Another crisp slap sounded, and another deep palm print appeared on Cao Tairan's left cheek. Cao Tairan, who had just stabilized his body, spat out a mouthful of blood mixed with broken teeth. His mind was somewhat muddled. Zhong Ziqing, Lu Manfeng, and Song Binhong's gazes immediately became much more serious. Their gazes were fixated on a stalwart figure not far away from Cao Tairan. This was a middle-aged man in a blue robe. His eyes were filled with killing intent. With a slap, Cao Tairan was unable to resist at all and could only passively take the beating. "It's an emperor spirit. Why is this guy here?" Zhong Ziqing murmured in a low voice. "Emperor spirit, it's actually this crazy guy. This guy took advantage of his identity as a rogue cultivator and did a lot of terrifying things. But why is this emperor spirit so strong?" Lu Manfeng was also quite surprised to hear this. The emperor spirit used to be at the peak of the Void Sky 7th level. It was a well-known name in the Far West. Because the emperor spirit was a rogue cultivator, he did not have any background. He was unrestrained and did not have any weaknesses. Many forces in the Far West did not dare to offend this ancestor. After all, the emperor spirit was so strong, and he was alone. If he could not beat them, he could just leave. If he could beat them, he would basically wipe out the entire family that offended him. It was a vicious method. This kind of troublesome guy, even Zhong Ziqing and the other island masters did not want to provoke. But now this guy suddenly appeared and saved the white-clothed youth. Could it be that the white-clothed youth was the emperor spirit's descendant? No, this guy. This Void Sky 8th level. Zhong Zicheng's pupils shrank. He had been wondering how the king spirit had been able to manipulate Cao Tairan so easily, but now, he had no idea what was going on. Only now did he notice that the emperor spirit's aura was extremely terrifying. It was even more terrifying than his own. Zhong Zicheng was at the peak of the void sky 7th level. But now, the emperor spirit's aura was even more terrifying than his. There was only one possibility, and that was that the emperor spirit's cultivation was higher than his. How did this guy level up? Zhong Zicheng muttered to himself. He had fought with the emperor spirit before, and the two of them were evenly matched. Now that his opponent had surpassed him, Zhong Zicheng naturally did not feel good. Pa. Cao Tairan was almost always in a state of confusion. Every time he was about to make a move, that big hand would mercilessly slap him in the face, making him dizzy and unable to tell north from south. When Cao Tairan's head was swollen like a pig's, the king spirit's right hand became a claw, and it cut off Cao Tairan's limbs to prevent him from moving. Then, it grabbed Cao Tairan's collar and brought him to Zhuo Wen. King spirit, what is your relationship with this person? Zhong Zicheng spoke at this moment, but his voice was full of solemnity. If this kid is your junior, we can give you face and not pursue this kid's mistakes, Zhong Zicheng said coldly. We don't need Dub City's vital planet, but you have to let Cao Tairan go. The emperor spirit did not speak. Instead, he looked at Zhuowen and said, Master, what do you think I should do? When the emperor spirit said this, Zhong Zicheng, Song Binhong, and Lu Manfeng's pupils shrank to the size of needles. They did not expect the emperor spirit, who was at the void sky 8th level, to call a brat his master. Was there something wrong with their ears? Zhuo Wen slowly stepped forward and said to Zhong Zicheng, You are giving us face, aren't you? Do you think your face is worth anything? Since you are all here, there is no need for you to leave. Zhong Zicheng came back to his senses and said with a gloomy smile, You want us to stay? Aren't you being a little too arrogant? Do you think you are qualified? As he spoke, Zhong Zicheng waved his right hand. The cannons on the densely packed flying ships behind him were all aimed at Zhuo Wen and Dub City behind him. It could be said that the attacks of countless flying ships had completely enveloped Dub City. Zhong Zicheng only needed to give the order, and such a dense attack would be enough to destroy Dub City. I said you can't leave, so don't even think about leaving. Zhuo Wen's gaze grew colder and colder. Soon after, a short old man slowly walked out of the flying ship beside him. The old man snorted, and the magnetic field around them became many times stronger. Boom! Boom! The countless flying ships that surrounded Dub City were all blown to smithereens by this terrifying magnetic field. The fragments formed a dense pile of debris in the starry sky. Don't aim these things at me. I'm not used to it. Old man Wu Qing had his hands behind his back. Although he was short, he looked like an extraordinary elite. He stood in the air and said those words in a very pretentious manner. Chapter 21-26. Changxiong Island this. Could it be old man Wu Qing? Zhong Zicheng and the other two looked at each other and saw the fear in each other's eyes. Old man Wu Qing's great name resounded like thunder in the hearts of the experts in the far west. It could be said that old man Wu Qing was a taboo existence in the hearts of the experts in the far west. He was known as the strongest cultivator in the far west. Zhong Zicheng and the other two were the leaders of the peak forces in the myriad magnetic sea, so they had a deeper understanding of old man Wu Qing. It was precisely because they had a deeper understanding that they were even more afraid. Not only was this old man a powerful cultivator at the 8th step of the void sky realm, but he was also a divine array master who was proficient in array Dao. It could be said that he was much more powerful and terrifying than the Emperor Spirit who had just advanced to the 8th step of the void sky realm. Zhong Zicheng was very clear that as long as old man Wu Qing made a move, the three of them would have no chance of winning. They might even be killed in an instant. Senior Wu Qing, may I know why you came out of seclusion? Zhong Zicheng immediately lowered his posture and bowed with cupped hands. Lu Manfeng and Song Binhong were even more submissive, not daring to be the slightest bit rash. On the other hand, Do Xian had a face full of shock. He had naturally heard of old man Wu Qing's name. It was just that Old Man Wuching was too mysterious. No one knew the exact location of Old Man Wuching's cave abode, and Old Man Wuching had almost become a mysterious powerhouse. Dou Xian knew that Old Man Wuching's appearance definitely had a lot to do with Zhuowen. Thinking of this, Dou Xian looked at Zhuowen with even more reverence. Old Man Wuching still had his hands behind his back and said indifferently, "This little guy wants me to come out of seclusion, so I came out. Is there a problem?" Zhong Zicheng's gaze turned cold. He finally began to face the white-clothed youth who was holding the hand of the beautiful woman. His brows furrowed slightly, and his eyes revealed a rare look of fear. Lu Manfeng and Song Binhong were both silent, but their gazes became extremely cautious and serious. They were secretly guessing the identity of this white-clothed youth. Not only did the Emperor Spirit call him master, but it was also clear that an expert like Old Man Wuching had come out of seclusion. "May I know little brother's name?" Zhong Zicheng asked with a smile as he cupped his hands towards Zhuowen. Zhuowen was as calm as an ancient well. He glanced indifferently at Zhong Zicheng and spread out his right hand. "You want to know my name? Return the saber in your hand to me first." The smile on Zhong Zicheng's face gradually froze. His eyes became gloomy and his brows furrowed. The Supreme Glorious Sun Saber was a secondary heaven-breaking divine artifact. He had never seen such a powerful divine artifact in the entire Far West land. Now that he had obtained the Supreme Dazzling Sun Saber, how could he possibly think of selling it? What? Unwilling to hand over the Supreme Glorious Sun Saber? The corners of Zhuowen's mouth were filled with a cold smile, and his gaze became increasingly sharp. The King's Spirit took a step forward and directed his murderous intent at Zhong Zicheng, suppressing him. Zhong Zicheng revealed a carefree smile and said, "Then I'll hand over the Supreme Glorious Sun Saber." Then, Zhong Zicheng swung his right hand and threw the Supreme Glorious Sun Saber to Zhuowen. Zhuowen frowned slightly and reached out with his right hand. Divine power poured out and turned into a giant hand that grabbed at the Supreme Glorious Sun Saber. Bang! However, the moment Zhuowen grabbed the Supreme Glorious Sun Saber, a terrifying scarlet energy burst out from the saber's blade. Then, Zhuowen gloomily discovered that the Supreme Glorious Sun Saber, which was originally in mid-air, had disappeared into thin air. On the other hand, the scarlet-red energy was like maggots that latched onto the large hand formed from Zhuowen's divine energy and actually corroded it completely. Zhuowen's gaze fell on Zhong Zicheng in front of him and found that Zhong Zicheng had disappeared without him noticing. A teleportation array? This Zhong Zicheng has been stalling for time. I'm afraid he's setting up this teleportation array. Zhuowen's eyes were gloomy as he stepped forward and landed where Zhong Zicheng had disappeared. His right hand's seals changed as he deduced the teleportation array's runes and operating trajectory. "Senior Wu Qing, you should be able to stop Zhong Zicheng, right? Why didn't you do anything just now?" Zhuowen looked at old Wu Qing gloomily. Old Wu Qing spread his hands and said, "Little guy, I only promised to protect you, not to be your fighter. Don't get it wrong." Zhuowen felt a little helpless and said in a deep voice, "Then do you know where Zhong Zicheng is being teleported?" Old Wu Qing said unhurriedly, "He should be returning to Longxiong Island. That is Zhong Zicheng's nest, but you need to hurry. Otherwise, Zhong Zicheng will take Longxiong Island with him." Zhuowen looked at the King's Spirit, who nodded and flew forward. A terrifying aura enveloped Lu Manfeng and Song Binhong, who were still in a daze. They couldn't help but tremble. "You two have two choices now. One is to be my slave for 1,000 years, and the other is to die. Do not doubt my methods," Zhuowen said coldly. Lu Manfeng and Song Binhong looked at each other. Just as they were about to say something, the King's Spirit's halberd flew towards Song Binhong. Song Binhong tried to block it, but the powerful force made him spit out blood. He was injured internally. The King's Spirit stepped forward, not giving Song Binhong a chance to breathe. He wanted to finish him off with a single strike. Song Binhong did not hesitate to beg for mercy. "I am willing to be your slave." The Emperor Spirit looked at Zhuowen. After seeing the latter nod his head, the Emperor Spirit put away his halberd and looked at Lu Manfeng with cold eyes. Lu Manfeng's face turned pale, and she quickly surrendered. Cao Tairan, who had been beaten by the king spirit, had regained his composure. Seeing Song Binhong and Lu Manfeng surrender, he didn't dare fight back. If he did, he'd be dead for sure. After planting slave seals on the three of them, Zhuowen said to Mu Chenxue, "Chen Shui, you go back to Dub City first. I need to chase after Zhong Zicheng. I will be back in a while." Mu Chenxue nodded. She knew the severity of the situation, so she said, "Be careful on the road." Zhuowen nodded and took the king spirit to Old Man Wu Qing's airship. "Hey, this old man's flying ship. Who allowed you to use this old man's flying ship?" Old Man Wu Qing shouted. When he was about to put away the airship, Zhuowen activated it and disappeared. A jade bottle appeared in Old Man Wu Qing's hand. Zhuowen's voice rang in Old Man Wu Qing's mind. "Old Man Wu Qing, this is the heavenly domain star essence. Sell this airship to me. This is the reward." Old Man Wu Qing frowned and opened the bottle. His eyes lit up, and he nodded. "This kid is not ordinary rich. He even has this kind of thing. Not bad, not bad." With that, Old Man Wu Qing put away the jade bottle and slowly entered Dub City with his hands behind his back. "King Spirit, do you know where Changxiong Island is?" In the cockpit, Zhuowen looked at King Spirit and asked. King Spirit nodded and said, "Master, don't worry. I know where Changxiong Island is. It is not far from here. With the speed of this airship, we will arrive very quickly." Changxiong Island was located in the north of the far west. There were endless asteroid belts here, and it looked like ruins. If one was not careful, the ship could be destroyed. In the center of the asteroid belt, there was a circular asteroid that looked like an island. This was Changxiong Island. In the asteroid belt outside of Changxiong Island, a white light appeared. Then, an old man in his 60s walked out of the white light. The old man held a golden broadsword in his right hand, and his eyes became very serious. "Take the Kanglan secret realm and escape to the far west." This old man was Zhong Zicheng. The reason he came back in person and did not leave immediately was because of the Kanglan secret realm on Changxiong Island. The Kanglan secret realm was a strange item that Zhong Zicheng obtained in the Yin, Qing, Yuan, and Q world. There was no life in the small world, but it had an extremely powerful characteristic. It could greatly increase the comprehension of cultivators who entered the Kanglan secret realm, and their cultivation speed would be much faster than usual. Zhong Zicheng's talent in the early years was not strong. It was very poor. However, after accidentally obtaining the Kanglan secret realm, Zhong Zicheng's cultivation speed increased too much. It also allowed Zhong Zicheng to improve step by step until he reached the peak of the 7th level of the virtual sky realm. With Zhong Zicheng's talent in the early years, the true God realm was already his limit, let alone the virtual sky world. Zhong Zicheng would not let go of such a treasure, so he specially came back to take the Kanglan secret realm away. He knew very well that even if he abandoned the entire Changxiong Island, as long as the Kanglan secret realm still existed, he could definitely cultivate a force that was not weaker than Changxiong Island in a short time. It could be said that the Kanglan secret realm was Zhong Zicheng's foundation. After entering the core area of Changxiong Island, Zhong Zicheng rushed to the place where the Kanglan secret realm was located. The entrance to the Kanglan secret realm was a green vortex that kept spinning. On both sides of the green vortex, two cultivators with strong auras were guarding the entrance. "Island Lord." Seeing Zhong Zicheng come, the two cultivators nodded and saluted with fanatical eyes. Zhong Zicheng nodded and said in a deep voice, "Call all the disciples in the Kanglan secret realm out. I have something to announce." The two cultivators looked at each other. Although they were puzzled by Zhong Zicheng's actions, they still did as he said. After arranging for all the disciples to leave the Kanglan secret realm, Zhong Zicheng waved his sleeve and put the Kanglan secret realm away. He said, "I have some matters to attend to and have to leave for a while. During this time, no one is allowed to enter Changxiong Island. Also, activate the Great Protective Formation." Chapter 21-27. Kanglan Secret Territory. However, before Zhong Zicheng could get far, he was knocked back to the sky above Changxiong Island by a flying ship. Zhong Zicheng's eyes were gloomy as he swung the supreme glorious sun blade in his hand. The blade radiance that was as hot as the sun poured out like rain and engulfed the flying ship in front of him. A majestic figure flew out from the flying ship. Countless halberd shadows poured out and blocked the terrifying blade radiance. Zhong Zicheng looked at the figure and knew something was wrong. He immediately retreated. The majestic figure that appeared was none other than the emperor spirit that was chasing after him. Whoosh! The flying ship was extremely fast and blocked Zhong Zicheng's path. Die for this old man! Zhong Zicheng's eyes were ferocious as he raised the supreme glorious sun blade above his head and slashed down. The saber shadow slashed out like a saber cutting through water. Then, a saber light that was much larger than the flying ship flew out and landed heavily on the flying ship. Rumble! The moment the blade radiance hit the flying ship, a young man in a white robe stepped out slowly. His eyes were solemn and his body was surrounded by a thick purple aura. He held the glorious purple galaxy divine sword in his right hand and the purple sword that was formed by the sevenfold Tao will in his left hand. The beginning demon golden sword circled around him. The terrifying sword Qi that carried the sevenfold Tao will suddenly slashed out and turned into a supreme sword radiance that stretched across the void like a bridge. Rumble! An earth-shattering collision sound was heard and many cracks appeared in the surrounding starry sky. It looked extremely terrifying. Unfortunately, although the sword radiance was powerful, it was still weaker than the blade radiance in the end. The sword gleam shattered into countless fragments, while the saber gleam continued to charge towards Zhuo Wen with irresistible force. You're overestimating yourself. You're just a fourth-stage virtual sky cultivator and you still want to block me. You're simply courting death. Zhong Zicheng grinned. His smile was full of mockery. In his opinion, Zhuo Wen would definitely die under this blade radiance. However, the smile on Zhong Zicheng's face only lasted for a moment before it completely stiffened. Zhuo Wen calmly took out a sparkling and translucent ice lotus from his spiritual ring. After that, he suddenly tossed the ice lotus out. A chilliness that was sufficient to freeze the entire starry sky surged out. The blade radiance was extremely fast and smashed heavily on the ice lotus. Then, in front of his stunned eyes, the blade radiance that was like a rainbow was frozen into a crescent-shaped ice cube. Crack! The crescent-shaped ice shattered in an instant. Zhuo Wen, who was holding two swords, leaped out from the countless ice shards and arrived in front of Zhong Zicheng at an extremely fast speed. His two swords unceremoniously performed the destruction sword technique. Sword Dragon Sword Art. Zhuo Wen with the purple swords Sword Qi Art, and Sword Qi translation. The Sword Qi Art translation Sword Art as Sword Qi translation. Translation. The two dragons continued to entangle with each other, surrounding Zhong Zicheng like two dragons swallowing a pearl. Break! Zhong Zicheng quickly slashed out a few times. The blade radiance intertwined like three suns and instantly broke the two translation dragons. Die! Zhong Zicheng jumped out and went straight to Zhuo Wen. This time, he wanted to kill Zhuo Wen completely. After killing him, he would immediately run away. Unfortunately, Zhuo Wen stood where he was and did not dodge at all. The mocking smile on his face became more and more intense. Zhong Zicheng regained his senses and heard a violent sound coming from behind him. He immediately thought of the king spirit and his face changed slightly. After hesitating for a while, Zhong Zicheng finally gave up on Zhuo Wen and turned to face the king spirit. Zhuo Wen's eyes were sharp and his two swords slashed out again. In the void, two huge territory phantoms appeared and smashed down heavily, causing Zhong Zicheng's body to sink involuntarily. Poochie! Zhong Zicheng was caught off guard, and the king spirit took advantage of the opportunity to strike. With a sharp halberd, the halberd pierced through Zhong Zicheng's chest. Fortunately, Zhong Zicheng was quick-witted and managed to avoid being hit. Otherwise, the attack would have seriously injured him. Zhong Zicheng roared, hating Zhuo Wen to the core. Zhong Zicheng took out a scroll from his spirit ring and opened it. He bit his thumb and pressed his fingerprint on the scroll. Then, Zhong Zicheng's power suddenly increased to the level of 8 virtual sky. He broke free from the king spirit's control and rushed towards Zhuowen with bloodshot eyes. "Little bastard, you have stopped me again and again. If I don't kill you today, I will take your surname." Zhong Zicheng's voice was full of hatred and terror. Clearly, he hated Zhuowen to the core. So fast. Zhuowen squinted his eyes. Zhong Zicheng was like a ghost, and in an instant, he was in front of Zhuowen. Then, the supreme shining sun blade stabbed into Zhuowen's chest, causing blood to splatter everywhere. "Die! Die!" Zhong Zicheng laughed maniacally and stabbed the supreme shining sun blade into Zhuowen's body. However, just as he was about to pull out the supreme glorious sun saber to finish off Zhuowen, he realized that Zhuowen had already grabbed the saber hilt. Then, a vast and terrifying divine sense surged into his glabella. Soul kill. Zhuowen suddenly raised his head and looked at Zhong Zicheng. His eyes were full of dizziness. Zhong Zicheng only felt a splitting headache. The divine sense that Zhuowen had extended into his spiritual space was like countless sharp hidden weapons, stirring up his spiritual space, causing his consciousness to become blurry. He involuntarily loosened his right hand that was holding the supreme glorious sun blade. Zhuowen was bleeding profusely, and his face was pale. The black-robed Zhuowen was summoned by him, and he punched Zhong Zicheng hard. Zhong Zicheng was in a state of confusion, and he was defenseless. He groaned and was forced to retreat. "King Spirit, take him down." At this moment, the King Spirit had arrived. The halberd in his hand pierced through Zhong Zicheng's back, and then he lifted Zhong Zicheng into the air and skewered him on the halberd like a lamb skewer. At the same time, the King Spirit's hands quickly formed a seal. A terrifying power was like an invisible chain, binding Zhong Zicheng's whole body, making it impossible for him to move. "Master, what do you want to do with Zhong Zicheng?" The King Spirit came in front of Zhuowen and threw Zhong Zicheng to the ground, forcing him to kneel in front of Zhuowen. At this moment, Zhuowen had pulled out the supreme shining sun blade from his chest. At the same time, he took a drop of heavenly domain star essence, and his injuries were completely healed. He looked at Zhong Zicheng, who was kneeling in front of him, and said coldly, "Tell me, how do you want to die?" Zhong Zicheng knelt on the ground. He had already regained consciousness. He just lowered his head, cold sweat dripping down his forehead. He didn't know what to say. On the other hand, countless disciples on Changxiong Island were dumbfounded. The battle between Zhong Zicheng, Zhuowen, and the King Spirit had taken place in the sky above Changxiong Island. The cultivators on Changxiong Island had seen the whole battle clearly. When they saw Zhong Zicheng kneeling in front of Zhuowen, the entire island was in an uproar. Zhong Zicheng was the master of their Longxiong Island, and he was a terrifying expert at the peak of the Void Sky 7th step. Now, he was kneeling in front of a white-robed youth in front of everyone. How could they not be shocked? Zhong Zicheng's whole body trembled. He felt the threat of death. When he noticed that Zhuowen had heavenly domain star essence, he knew that he had made a terrible mistake this time. He had offended someone he should not have offended. "Let me live. I am willing to give up the Kanglan secret realm," Zhong Zicheng said in a trembling voice. It was not easy for him to reach the peak of the 7th step void sky. He did not want his hundreds of thousands of years of hard work to be destroyed. He still had a long life, and he did not want to die like this. Kanglan secret realm? Zhuowen looked at the King Spirit in confusion, and the King Spirit explained the Kanglan secret realm respectfully. "Oh, the Kanglan secret realm can increase one's comprehension and cultivation speed. Doesn't that mean it has the same effect as the fire spirit juice?" Zhuowen said in surprise. He had given all the fire spirit juice he had to Riker. Although the fire spirit juice's effect of increasing comprehension was very good, it was useless for Void Sky. However, the effect on Void Sky cultivators was very small. Of course, it wasn't completely ineffective. It was just that the amount of fire spirit juice needed to increase comprehension was many times greater than that of true divinity cultivators. They have the same effect, but the Kanglan secret realm's effect is much better than the fire spirit juice. The Kanglan secret realm is not only for cultivators below the Void Sky realm, but also for Void Sky cultivators. It can be said that the Kanglan secret realm is very famous in the far west. Many void sky cultivators covet the Kanglan secret realm. If Zhong Ziqing was not strong enough, the Kanglan secret realm would have been snatched away by others. The king spirit explained patiently. I see. Zhuowen's eyes blazed as he looked at Zhong Ziqing and said, hand over the Kanglan secret realm. Zhong Ziqing hesitated and said, you have to swear to the heavenly Tao that after I hand over the Kanglan secret realm, you will let me live. The Kanglan secret realm should be on you. As long as I kill you, I can still obtain the Kanglan secret realm. Why should I do this? Zhuowen said indifferently. Zhong Ziqing's face stiffened and turned pale. After hesitating for a moment, he finally handed over the Kanglan secret realm. Zhuowen looked at the green vortex floating in front of him. He knew that this vortex was the entrance to the Kanglan secret realm. You go in first. Zhuowen looked at Zhong Ziqing and said. Zhong Ziqing's eyes were filled with helplessness. He could only follow Zhuowen's instructions and enter the Kanglan secret realm. Zhuowen and the king spirit followed closely behind and entered the green vortex. This was a strange space, surrounded by green mist. Other than that, there was nothing else. The moment Zhuowen entered this space, he felt refreshed. It was as if his internal organs had been cleansed by the green mist. He felt refreshed. Chapter 21-28. Farewell. Zhuowen's eyes lit up, and his face was filled with excitement. The Kanglan secret realm's effects were not bad. After entering, he could clearly feel that his perception had increased. The instant his comprehension increased, his understanding of the martial Tao also deepened. Even his own Tao insight had unknowingly gained a deeper understanding. This Kanglan secret realm is really good. Zhuowen could not help but exclaim. Zhong Ziqing, who was walking in front, quickly said, My lord, this Kanglan secret realm is very powerful. It is enough to create many elites for you, so, Zhuowen's face darkened. With a wave of his sleeve, the three of them left the Kanglan secret realm. Zhuowen did not hesitate to put away the Kanglan secret realm. He said to Zhong Ziqing, This Kanglan secret realm is worth your life. Zhong Ziqing's eyes lit up. Just as he was about to thank Zhuowen, his next words made him feel depressed. Zhuowen said calmly, Become my slave for eternity. Otherwise, you will die. Zhong Ziqing's face turned pale. He clenched his fists. Although he was unwilling, after feeling the strong murderous intent of the Emperor spirit, he felt powerless. Master, Zhong Ziqing sighed and knelt in front of Zhuowen. He could not bear to call him that. Follow me back to Dub City. Zhuowen planted the slave seal in Zhong Ziqing's soul and left Changxiong Island with the two of them. As for the resources of Changxiong Island, Zhuowen would not let them go. However, Changxiong Island was too big, and there were only 3 of them. They could not move so many resources. When he returned to Dub City, he would arrange for people to come to Changxiong Island. Of course, other than Changxiong Island, there were also the resources of Shuangchong Island, Taibin Island, and Jingshan Island. Zhuowen would not let them go. After returning to Dub City, the higher-ups of Rika heaved a sigh of relief when they saw Zhuowen return safely. Then, they cheered. Zhuowen did not disappoint. He arranged for many people to go to Changxiong Island, Taibin Island, Shuangchong Island, and Jingshan Island to receive resources. Are you okay? Mu Chunxue translation. She was like a butterfly. She landed in front of Zhuowen. She wiped Zhuowen translation. She wiped the dirt translation on Zhuowen's face and Zhuowen's. Zhuowen grinned and hugged Mu Chunxue. I'm fine. The Rika people when they saw this scene. Zhuowen translation and Mu Chunxue translation everyone. Was is translation. It could be said that the main reason Zhuowen had risked his life to go to the waning phases of the Great Brahma domain was because of Mu Chunxue. Behind Rika, Yun Chuyu, Yin Bingyun, and Sequoia stood side by side, looking a little pale. This was especially true for Yun Chuyu. Her beautiful eyes were misty, and she was secretly depressed. Chuyu, I've asked around. That woman's name is Mu Chunxue. She was Zhuowen's wife when he was still weak. Yin Bingyun noticed the dejected look on Yun Chuyu's face and tried to comfort her. Yun Chuyu forced a smile and said, "Auntie, I know all of this. When Big Brother Zhuo went to the waning moons, I already knew." "Then you?" Yin Bingyun didn't know what to say next. Yun Chuyu smiled and said, "We've already troubled Big Brother Zhuo so much. We can't let him trouble us anymore. It's time for us to leave." Sequoia nodded and said, "Big Sister Chuyu is right. Big Brother Zhuo has helped us too much. It's a pity that we're too weak to help him. Leaving is the best choice." Yin Bingyun nodded and said, "I'll go talk to Zhuowen." At this moment, Zhuowen was hugging Mu Chenxue. He was speaking softly and sweetly. "Chen Shui, you've advanced again. You've already reached the second step of the virtual sky realm?" Zhuowen looked at Mu Chenxue in pleasant surprise. Mu Chenxue nodded and said, "Yes. I don't know why, but ever since I was reborn, my cultivation has suddenly increased to the first step of the virtual sky realm. Moreover, the energy in my body is like a furnace, extremely vigorous. While you were away, I tried to absorb the energy in my body. Then, I unknowingly advanced in rank." Mu Chenxue was also quite confused. It could be said that her cultivation advancement was a bit strange. She hadn't even done anything and had easily advanced in rank. Zhuowen nodded but didn't say anything. He knew that when Mu Chenxue was reborn, he had even thrown in something as precious as a level 9 divine herb. To put it bluntly, the value of the divine herb he had thrown in last time was around a third of all the resources he had obtained from the Luotian Palace ruins. There was only one level 9 divine herb, the Aurora flower. After using it, Zhuowen no longer had anything as precious as a level 9 divine herb. However, Zhuowen didn't regret it. If it could increase Mu Chenxue's aptitude and cultivation, what was a level 9 divine herb? "Zhuowen, the three of us are planning to leave." Suddenly, a cold voice came from behind Rika. Yin Bingyun slowly walked over with Yun Chuyu and Hong Shan. "Thank you for your hospitality this time, as well as saving my life several times. I will remember all of this in my heart and will never dare to forget it." Yin Bingyun came in front of Zhuowen, placed her right hand on her chest, and bowed solemnly. Zhuowen waved his hand and said, "We're all friends. It's only right for me to save you. I can't just stand by and watch you die. You should be planning to leave the far west and head to the domain of stars, right? I happen to be planning to go to the domain of stars as well. Why don't we go together?" Yin Bingyun shook her head and said, "There's no need. As long as you give the three of us a flying ship, we know where to go." Zhuowen frowned slightly. He noticed that Yin Bingyun's tone was a little angry, and he couldn't help but look at Yun Chuyu, who was beside Yin Bingyun. Perhaps because she noticed Zhuowen's gaze, Yun Chuyu hurriedly lowered her head and didn't look at Zhuowen's eyes. After a moment of silence, Zhuowen nodded and sighed softly. "All right then. Be careful on your way. I will arrange for someone to give you the best flying ship." "Thank you very much." Yin Bingyun's actions were swift and decisive, and she did not drag things out. After she finished speaking, she left with Yun Chuyu and Hong Shan. "Husband, these three women seem to be interested in you, especially that Yun Chuyu." Although Zhuowen was slow, it didn't mean that Mu Chenxue was slow as well. She was quite observant and could tell at a glance that the three women were reluctant to part with him, but were just pretending to be calm. Especially Yun Chuyu, whose small action of lowering her head completely exposed her inner feelings. Chapter 21-29. Back to the star region. Mu Chenxue giggled when she saw Zhuowen being deflated. She stretched out her slender jade-like hand and cracked her fingers. She said in an old-fashioned manner, "It's said that outstanding men will be admired by many women. I didn't believe it before, but now I do." Zhuowen felt a headache coming on. He quickly begged for mercy. "Chen Shui, please let me go. I can't take your tricks." Mu Chenxue smiled and scratched Zhuowen's nose. She said with a smile, "I'm just joking with you. I know your personality and I'm willing to believe you. However, why haven't I seen Wushang?" Hearing this, Zhuowen's gaze became much more serious. What's wrong? Did something happen to Wushang? Mu Chunxue felt that something was wrong and asked. Zhuowen shook his head and said, no, actually Wushang is fine now. It's just that she's not in the Great Brahma domain, but in the Six Desires heavenly domain, which is quite far from here. Zhuowen thought about it, but in the end, he did not tell Mu Chunxue about Moi and Wushang because he really did not know where to start. I can only wait until I go to the Six Desires heavenly domain to find Wushang. Zhuowen thought to himself. Oh, I see. Why did Wushang go to the Six Desires heavenly domain? Mu Chunxue asked curiously. Back then, Moi and Wushang was considered Mu Chunxue's closest sister. Moreover, because of her relationship with Mu Chunxue, she helped Zhuowen a lot. Therefore, Mu Chunxue was still very concerned about Moi and Wushang. The people of the Six Desires Palace took a fancy to Wushang's talent, so they took her away. Zhuowen briefly recounted what happened at that time. Mu Chunxue finally knew the ins and outs of the matter. The next time you go to the Six Desires Palace, I want to go too. Mu Chunxue said. Zhuowen nodded and smiled. All right, let's go together when the time comes. Furthermore, there are some things that I still need to explain after Wushang comes along. Although Mu Chunxue found Zhuowen's words strange, she didn't pursue the matter. Instead, she asked gently, when do you plan to go to the starfield? Do you need me to go with you? Zhuowen shook his head and said, no need. You've just been reborn, so you're not particularly familiar with the virtual sky world yet. You should stay in Duanshu City for a while. When you're completely familiar with it, I think with your current aptitude, you'll soon catch up to me. Mu Chunxue rolled her eyes at Zhuowen, but she didn't reject Zhuowen's suggestion. 3 days later, a flying ship turned into a stream of light and left Dub City. Zhuowen stood at the top of the tower and looked at the flying ship leaving. He sighed in his heart and said to the Emperor Spirit beside him, you should have installed a tracking formation on the flying ship of Yin Bingyun and the other two, right? The Emperor Spirit said in a deep voice, this subordinate has done everything. If their flying ship is in danger, this subordinate will know immediately. Master, don't worry. Zhuowen nodded gently and said, you should also pack up. In a few days, we will also leave Dub City and go to the Starfield. 3 days later, Zhuowen was ready to go to the Starfield. This time, Zhuowen was going to the Starfield mainly for revenge. He had never been a good person, but he also wasn't a bad person. He would repay the kindness of others with a drop of water, but if others wanted to harm him, he would seek revenge for the smallest grievance. Previously, when he was chased by the dark fantasy sex ancestor, Yu Wuxi, he almost died. If it wasn't for the teleportation formation provided by Ren Yonggan, he probably wouldn't have survived. Zhuowen was forced to flee like a stray dog. If he didn't take revenge, he wouldn't be like Zhuowen. The huge flying ship stopped in the sky where Dub City was located. Zhuowen floated in front of the flying ship, and behind him were 5 figures. These 5 people were the Emperor Spirit, Cao Tairan, Song Binhong, Zhong Ziqing, and Lu Manfeng. Among them, the Emperor Spirit was a powerhouse with an 8th-step void sky cultivation, while Zhong Ziqing and the other 3 were all 7th-step void sky cultivation. If such a lineup was placed in the Starfield, only the top 10 sects could compete with them. Of course, Old Man Wuqing had a strange personality and naturally wouldn't get involved. Instead, he entered the flying ship early. Do Xian, while I'm not here, I'll leave Dub City to you. Zhuowen looked at Do Xian, who was standing among the Rikeres higher-ups, and said lightly. In the entire Dub City, Do Xian's strength was the strongest, and he was also a 7th-step void sky cultivator. Moreover, the 4 island masters of the Myriad Magnet Sea were all subdued by Zhuowen, so Zhuowen didn't think there was anything wrong with having Do Xian in charge. Do Xian quickly cupped his hands and said, Master Zhuo, don't worry. I'll help you manage Dub City well. I won't let anyone invade at will. If there's anything wrong, I'm willing to offer my head. Zhuowen nodded and didn't say anything else. Instead, his eyes fell on Mu Chunxue and the Rikeres higher-ups. He nodded lightly and entered the flying ship. The 5 people followed closely behind Zhuowen and entered the flying ship. Then, The flying ship rose into the sky and broke through space. Chen Shui, about that matter, are you sure you don't want to tell when? After the flying ship disappeared into the starry sky where Dub City was located, Feng Xiao, who was standing beside Mu Chunxue, frowned slightly. Mu Chunxue shook her head and said, I don't want him to worry, and that thing isn't necessarily a bad thing. Feng Xiao said worriedly, you should be more careful during this period. I'll be by your side. You can't be careless about this kind of thing. Grandma, don't worry, I'll be careful. Mu Chunxue smiled brightly. Master, Yin Bingyun, and the other two didn't seem to be going to the starfield. Instead, they went to the Brahma Fiend Star at the border of the Great Brahma Heavenly Domain. Inside the flying ship, the Emperor Spirit said solemnly. Zhuowen nodded and breathed a sigh of relief in his heart. Although it has been a long time since he left the starfield, he knew that the sects in the starfield should still have a warrant for him. Many cultivators in the starfield knew that Yin Bingyun and the other two were with him. If the three of them entered the starfield, it would be no different from walking into a trap. The Brahma Fiend Star was indeed a good place to go. After all, it was Hongshan's hometown. Although the Jianghong Trading Company and Hongshan's grandfather, Wu Han, were no longer there, with Yin Bingyun and the other two's strength, they could do whatever they wanted on the Brahma Fiend Star. Over the years, Yin Bingyun and the other two naturally obtained a lot of benefits in Rika and all broke through to the virtual sky world. Among them, Yun Chuyu and Hongshan both reached the first virtual sky world while Yin Bingyun reached the second virtual sky world. The strongest person on the Brahma Fiend Star was Luo Pengfei of the Dazzling Light Trading Company, but he only reached the second virtual sky world. If Luo Pengfei wanted to deal with Hongshan, he would be asking for trouble. Let's go directly to the starfield first. Zhuowen said and focused on controlling the flying ship. The distance between the far west and the starfield was indeed quite far. Zhuowen's flying ship was Old Man Wuqing's flying ship. Its speed was absolutely shocking. Chapter 2130. A strong return. Zhuowen's eyes glowed as he looked at the star field formed by countless star systems that looked like a huge plane. Zhuowen, am back again. Back then, I was like a stray dog that was hunted down and wanted to be killed. Today, Zhuowen, will make you pay with your blood. Zhuowen muttered in his heart as he landed at the eastern entrance of the Heaven Receiving Stone. It had been more than 10 years since Zhuowen's incident, and the security at the Heaven Receiving Stone was much more lax than before. Of course, this was only relative. There were still many soldiers at the entrance of the Heaven Receiving Stone, and there was even a void sky cultivator guarding it. When Zhuowen's group landed at the entrance, there were many cultivators in front of them who were being strictly inspected by the cultivators at the entrance. Zhuowen was familiar with the attire of the cultivators at the entrance. They were the attire of the disciples of the Dark Mirage sect and the High Heaven sect in Dongyu, and no cultivators from Heavenly Demon Island intervened. Zhuowen knew that the reason why Heavenly Demon Island did not intervene should have a lot to do with Mo Fan and Yu Shan. Yu Shan was the most outstanding genius of Heavenly Demon Island. Her status was noble, and her talent was extremely high. Mo Fan was the son of the sect master of Heavenly Demon Island. Needless to say, his status and power were naturally high. If the two of them strongly opposed the arrest of Zhuowen, the sect master of Heavenly Demon Island, Mo Ji, would not arrest Zhuowen. It's been more than 10 years. The troops at the Heaven Receiving Stone in West Yu, North Yu, and South Yu have long been withdrawn. Why is Dongyu still so strict? How troublesome, Zhuowen heard a short and fat cultivator at the back of the line grumble when he brought the 7 people in. You should be careful with your words. Do you know how big the gap between the Dark Mirage sect and Zhuowen is? That Zhuowen not only killed the #1 genius of the Gloomy Illusion sect, he even caused a huge ruckus in the Gloomy Illusion sect. It is said that he even took away all the resources in the Gloomy Illusion sect's forbidden grounds. He is simply audacious. Yu Wuxi was so angry that he wanted to kill someone. Dongyu is why Dongyu is so strict, another thin and tall man said softly as he nudged the cultivator who complained earlier. I often hear you mention that Zhuowen. Is he really so powerful? The short and fat man curiously. The tall, thin man said mysteriously, he is not very powerful. It is said that his cultivation is not particularly high, but he possesses an extremely large amount of heavenly domain star essence. It is by relying on this heavenly domain star essence that he was able to successfully wreak havoc in the demonic illusion sect. Heavenly star? Heavens, this kid actually has such a precious treasure on him, it's really inconceivable. The short and fat man exclaimed in a low voice. At this moment, Zhuo Wen happened to walk to the side of the two. He chuckled and said, "Moreover, I know that Zhuo Wen obtained the heavenly domain star essence from the Middle Universe's training ground. At that time, the 8 great sects shamelessly snatched something from a junior. Their faces were extremely ugly. Who are you? Dong you." The thin and tall man looked warily at the entrance in front of him and found that the guards at the entrance had not heard the noise. He let out a sigh of relief and glared at Zhuowen a little angrily. Zhuowen just smiled and did not care much about the thin and tall man's rebuke. Instead, he said, "Maybe you don't know? That old fart Yu Wu Sai personally chased after that Zhuowen. Do you know what the result was?" When the thin and tall man and the short and fat man heard Zhuowen call Yu Wu Sai an old fart, they were scared out of their wits. When they wanted to stop Zhuowen, they found that they could not move at all. Oh no, who is this person? What a powerful aura. The two men looked at each other and were shocked. I'm sure that old fart won't tell anyone about this because it will damage his reputation. Think about it, the old ancestor of a sect, an 8-step void heaven master, chased after a 2-step void heaven cultivator. Not only did he fail to capture that cultivator, but he even let that cultivator escape. Don't you think it's funny? Zhuowen smiled and slowly drew the brilliant amethyst star river divine sword in his right hand. A terrifying sword chi erupted, as if it could tear the entire starry sky apart. At the entrance, the cultivators lined up in a long line immediately noticed this sharp sword chi and immediately made way. This sword chi made them feel the threat of death. The guards at the entrance naturally felt this fierce sword chi as well, and they frowned before flashing out successively to surround Zhuowen. There were more than 20 guards. Behind the guards, 2 cultivators with rather powerful auras walked over. These 2 cultivators were both Void Sky Realm experts. However, these 2 people were dressed differently. One of them was from the Dark Illusion sect, while the other was from the High Heaven sect. Their cultivations weren't high, only about 2-step Void Heaven masters. "Brother, what do you mean by this?" The Dark Illusion sect Void Heaven cultivator cupped his hands and asked with a dignified expression. Although he didn't like Zhuowen's arrogant behavior, he didn't dare to act recklessly after he found that he couldn't see through this white-clothed youth. My meaning is very simple, that is, the smile on Zhuowen's face became more and more brilliant. He suddenly spun the brilliant amethyst star river divine sword in his right hand, and a purple sword chi slashed through the void and quickly shuttled through the surrounding guards. Poochie. Without a sound, the 20 or so guards surrounding Zhuowen all clutched their necks and fell to the ground one after another. They were no longer breathing. The surrounding cultivators were all dumbstruck. They immediately moved away from Zhuowen and stared blankly at the 20 or so guards who had completely fallen. The remaining 2 Void Heaven cultivators trembled as they looked at the white-clothed youth in front of them in fear. The Dark Illusion sect cultivator couldn't help but retreat. He looked at Zhuowen and shouted, "You! What do you want to do? Don't you know who we are?" "I know. You're a disciple of the Dark Illusion sect, and he's a disciple of the High Heaven sect. That's why I attacked." Zhuowen was still smiling brightly, but in the eyes of the 2 Void Heaven cultivators, this smile was actually ice-cold. "Give us a reason." The High Heaven sect Void Heaven cultivator also retreated, cold sweat dripping down his forehead. They really couldn't understand who this white-clothed youth was and why he attacked them. The smile on Zhuowen's face grew wider and wider. He slowly wiped his face with his left hand and his face began to change, revealing another face. "You're not unfamiliar with this face, right?" Zhuowen slowly walked over with the brilliant amethyst star river divine sword in hand, still smiling. The hearts of the two void sky cultivators trembled when they saw Zhuo Wen's face. Zhuo, you actually dare to come back. You're simply courting death. The Dark Illusion Sect Void Heaven cultivator roared and immediately turned to flee. At the same time, he took out a communication jade slip, obviously intending to send a message to the Dark Illusion Sect. Chapter 2131. 3 demolishes the Dark Illusion Pavilion. The cultivator screamed in agony. Just as he was about to curse out loud, another sword beam shot out from his neck. Next, his head flew up into the air. He died with his eyes wide open. This sword chi was so powerful that it destroyed the illusory heavenly bridge in the cultivator's body the moment it beheaded him. Run! The Void Sky cultivator from the High Heaven sect was so scared that he fled in panic. Unfortunately, his speed was not as fast as Zhuowen's sword chi, and he soon became a ghost under the purple sword chi. Zhuowen withdrew his sword and stood up, receiving the respectful gazes of the surrounding cultivators. His gaze fell on the entrance and he muttered in a low voice, Zhuowen, I'm back. Let's go. With that, Zhuowen led Di Ling and the others into the entrance, leaving behind a group of dumbfounded onlookers. F***CK. 2 Void Sky cultivators were killed in seconds just like that. Isn't this young man too terrifying? The short and fat cultivator from before could not help but sigh. Are you stupid? Didn't that person just say it? This young man is the legendary Zhuowen, the Zhuowen who wreaked havoc in the Dark Illusion Sect. The tall and thin man could not help but slap the short and fat man's head as he spoke in an extremely rude manner. In just an instant, the onlookers were in an uproar and their eyes were filled with shock. No one expected that they would encounter the legendary Zhuowen who was wanted by the 8 great sects as soon as they entered the entrance. Zhuowen is back. I'm afraid there will be a good show in Dongyu. Let's go in quickly. It was unknown who said this, but the cultivators who were originally in a daze immediately swarmed forward and entered the entrance. No one was a fool. They knew that Zhuowen dared to return to Dongyu this time not to throw away his life but to come prepared. They just did not know what kind of sparks would fly between Zhuowen and the Dark Illusion Sect. The receiving heaven stone was still desolate, surrounded by the scattered residences of the major forces of Dongyu and the incomparably dark starry sky. At the entrance of the receiving heaven stone, a white-clothed young man slowly walked out with 6 cultivators with powerful auras. The receiving heaven stone is still the same. Even the Dark Illusion Pavilion has been rebuilt. Let's tear it down again to make it 3 times. The smile on Zhuowen's face grew wider and wider. His powerful divine sense had already scanned the entire receiving heaven stone the moment he entered this place and found the Dark Illusion Pavilion of the Dark Illusion Sect as well as High Heaven Pavilion of the High Heaven Sect. Although Zhuowen did not have a good impression of High Heaven Sect, because of Ren Yonggan, he did not intend to attack High Heaven Pavilion. Of course, if he entered Dongyu and High Heaven Sect recklessly attacked him, Zhuowen could not be blamed for being ruthless. When Zhuowen walked straight towards the Dark Illusion Pavilion, many cultivators rushed out of the entrance and followed Zhuowen's group with fanatical gazes. On the receiving heaven stone, many cultivators saw this scene and their eyes were filled with surprise. Obviously, they did not understand why so many cultivators suddenly appeared. Could it be that no one checked the entrance of the receiving heaven stone? Are they going to the Dark Illusion Pavilion? But soon, when the cultivators on the receiving heaven stone saw this group of people heading towards the Dark Illusion Pavilion, a strange look appeared in their eyes. The white-clothed young man leading the way looks familiar. I think I've seen him somewhere before. Some cultivators on the receiving heaven stone also looked at the white-clothed young man, feeling that he looked familiar. Master, why don't you let me do it? Di Ling came to Zhuowen's side and whispered. Zhuowen waved his hand and said, "There's no need for that. You can do it later. I just want to vent my anger today. When we enter Dongyu and get serious, you'll have the chance to do it." The Emperor Spirit nodded and didn't insist. It just followed Zhuowen silently. Although Zhuowen's cultivation was not high, his battle prowess was very strong. He was not weaker than a 7th step Void Sky cultivator, so Di Ling was not very worried about Zhuowen. Moreover, the auras of the cultivators on the receiving Heavenstone were too weak. Not many of them could threaten Zhuowen. Zhong Ziqing and the other three looked straight ahead. They also did not put the cultivators on the receiving Heavenstone in their eyes. Elder Heartless followed behind and kept yawning. Perhaps he felt that it was too boring. He was so bored that his balls hurt, so he could only yawn to relieve his boredom. Arriving in front of the Dark Illusion Pavilion, Zhuowen waved his sleeve and the no-beginning demon golden sword flew out. 48 golden short swords intertwined in mid-air, forming a terrifying vortex of killing intent. Boom. The vortex of killing intent created a whirlpool that reached the sky and slammed into the Dark Illusion Pavilion. Then, an earth-shattering tremor spread out. The restrictions on the surface of the Dark Illusion Pavilion were like paper, instantly shattering. Then, under the constant churning of the vortex of killing intent, the huge Dark Illusion Pavilion collapsed. Many cultivators rushed out of the Dark Illusion Pavilion. However, the moment these cultivators rushed out, a sharp purple sword chi would always appear and enter the space between their eyebrows, completely destroying their life force. As more and more cultivators came out of the Dark Illusion Pavilion, more and more corpses appeared in front of the pavilion. They were almost piled up into a small mountain, causing the cultivators who followed to feel a chill in their hearts. Who is it? How dare you act so arrogantly in this old man's Dark Illusion Pavilion? Die. An old voice came from the depths of the Dark Illusion Pavilion. Then, an old man in a grey robe rushed out. Zhuowen still casually slashed out a sword chi. This sword chi turned into a purple light and sank into the grey-robed old man's forehead. However, this grey-robed old man was not an ordinary person. His eyes were sharp and his hands were fast enough to dodge this fatal sword chi. Instead, the sword chi swept past the grey-robed old man's shoulder and cut off his right shoulder. Ah! The grey-robed old man screamed as his right shoulder was cut into a bloody mess by the sword chi. He retreated quickly and looked at Zhuowen with fear in his eyes. Hey! You dodged my sword. Zhuowen was a little surprised by the grey-robed old man's reaction speed. His sword chi was enough to kill any cultivator below the 4th step of the Void Sky Realm. This grey-robed old man was only at the 3rd step of the Void Sky Realm. Naturally, it was beyond Zhuowen's expectations that he could dodge this sword chi. You! Who are you? The grey-robed old man trembled as he stared at Zhuowen and asked in a trembling voice. Zhuowen did not answer. Instead, he quickly slashed out 4 times with the purple sword in his right hand. 4 purple sword chi seemed to teleport as they pierced through the grey-robed old man's limbs. Then, the grey-robed old man watched as his limbs were cut off by the 4 sword chi and sent flying. Blood splattered everywhere. It was a ghastly sight. Ah! The grey-robed old man screamed and fell to the ground from the sky. His wounds were bleeding profusely. Even though he used his divine power to heal his injuries, it was useless. The wounds on his limbs could not be stopped. Chapter 2132. Debt Collector, who are you? What are you trying to do? Why do you want to destroy the Dark Illusion Pavilion? Do you know the consequences of destroying the Dark Illusion Pavilion? The grey-robed old man on the ground shouted, trying to use the name of the Dark Illusion sect to intimidate Zhuowen. I know. How could I not know? More than 10 years ago, I tore down the Dark Illusion Pavilion twice, so how could I not know the consequences? Zhuowen said indifferently. The grey-robed old man's pupils constricted as if he had thought of something. He carefully sized up the white-robed young man before him again and could not help but shout, you're Zhuowen? You little bastard, you dare to return to Dongyu? If the sect master and the ancestor find out, you'll definitely die. If you know what's good for you, release this old man immediately. Perhaps the Dark Illusion sect will leave your corpse intact. Master, this person speaks without thinking. Do you want me to kill him for you? The Emperor Spirit asked in a deep voice. Zhuowen waved his hand and landed in front of the grey-robed old man. He smiled and said, if I release you, Will the Dark Illusion sect really leave my corpse intact? The grey-robed old man sighed softly. He knew that this Zhuowen before him was truly afraid of the Dark Illusion sect. He could not help but sneer, of course. As long as you listen to me and follow me back to the Dark Illusion sect, it'll be easy to leave your corpse intact. Perhaps the ancestor will be happy and may not take your life. Oh, so that's how it is. Zhuowen nodded seriously, but the grey-robed old man became even more smug. He said, "Then why aren't you helping me recover my limbs? What are you standing there for?" Of course. Zhuowen smiled sinisterly. He suddenly raised his right foot and stepped on the grey-robed elder's head without holding back. He stomped the elder's head deep into the ground, causing it to sink deep into the ground. Zhuowen's right hand suddenly reached into the grey-robed old man's chest and mercilessly pulled out the illusory sky bridge from his body. The enormous illusory sky bridge stretched across the sky. 3 of the 9 steps on it had already been lit up. "Woo-woo, you, what are you doing?" The grey-robed old man's entire face sunk into the ground. He could only cry out in pain. Especially when he saw his illusory sky bridge being forcefully pulled out, an ominous feeling arose in his heart. "Emperor Spirit, break this illusory sky bridge," Zhuowen said indifferently. The Emperor Spirit nodded and jumped onto the heavenly bridge. Then, he stomped his right foot, and a vast amount of energy surged out of him. Crack. After that, cracks appeared on the surface of the illusory heavenly bridge, and then it collapsed inch by inch, shattering into countless pieces. His sky bridge to the sky bridge to the sky illusion sects to the illusory sky bridge bridge. 2 to the sky 10, the sky bridge bridge the sky to 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 the sky sky. Sky ascento impossible to break break break. His sky 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 to the sky not to the sky to the end to the sky 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 to the sky. Zhuowen kicked the grey-robed old man to Zhong Ziqing behind him and said, "Take him with you. He'll be useful in Dongyu later." Although Zhong Ziqing was unwilling, he was now Zhuowen's servant. Naturally, he didn't dare to disobey Zhuowen's orders. When Zhuowen and his group left the Sky Receiving Stone and headed for Dongyu, the cultivators on the Sky Receiving Stone remained motionless as if they had been petrified. It took a long time for them to react. It seems like Zhuowen didn't come with good intentions. There will be a storm in Dongyu this time. Many cultivators smelled the signs of a storm. They all knew that Dongyu wouldn't be peaceful in the near future. In Dongyu, the star continent where the Great Fortune Trading Company was located, a flying ship flew over and stopped not far from the Great Fortune Trading Company. Zhuowen walked down from the flying ship, took out a jade slip and threw it to Zhong Ziqing. He said lightly, "This jade slip records the specific address of the Serene Fantasy sect. Go to the Serene Fantasy sect and throw this old man directly at the gate of the Serene Fantasy sect. Tell him that I, Zhuowen, have returned." Zhong Ziqing took the jade slip and sighed in his heart. He had to leave the star continent as Zhuowen said. "Master, what are you doing here? Aren't you going to settle accounts with the Serene Fantasy sect?" The King Spirit asked doubtfully. The King Spirit had heard about what had happened to Zhuowen in the star field. He knew that Zhuowen should have a grudge against the top 10 sects in the star field. "Back then, I put the Heavenly Star Essence up for auction at the Great Fortune Trading Company. I haven't received the reward yet. Naturally, I have to take back the reward I deserve." Zhuowen explained and stepped into the Great Fortune Trading Company. 7 guests, are you going to put up your items for auction or purchase? At the entrance of the Great Fortune Trading Company, 2 brawny men asked Zhuowen politely. "I'm neither. I'm here to collect a debt," Zhuowen said lightly. "Oh, are you here to make trouble?" The 2 brawny men looked at each other and revealed a cold look in their eyes. Then, they mercilessly threw a punch at Zhuowen. Unfortunately, Lu Manfeng and Song Binhong, who were standing on Zhuowen's left and right, easily caught the 2 men's fists. Then, with a fierce twist, the 2 men broke out in cold sweat from the pain and couldn't help but retreat. In order to perform well in front of Zhuowen, Lu Manfeng and Song Binhong would not let the 2 brawny men retreat. "Catcher! Catcher!" The two of them spat out divine power from their right hands, and the two brawny men immediately exploded into a cloud of blood mist. They could not be more dead. The moment the two brawny men were killed, all the cultivators in the Great Fortune Trading Company were alarmed. They looked at Zhuowen and the group of uninvited guests and kept quiet out of fear. They did not dare to make a sound. Zhuowen entered the Great Fortune Trading Company and looked around. He found that the Great Fortune Trading Company was much more magnificent than before. It seemed that the Great Fortune Trading Company had obtained a lot of benefits from the last auction of the Heavenly Star Essence. "Who is making trouble at the Great Fortune Trading Company?" A cold voice sounded. A woman in a red dress walked out of the Great Fortune Trading Company. The woman in the red dress saw Zhuowen, who was standing at the front. His clothes were whiter than snow, and the anger in her beautiful eyes disappeared. Instead, it was replaced by shock. "Zhuowen, you dare to come back?" The woman in the red dress trembled and said with a gloomy face. "Manager Guo, how have you been?" Zhuowen smiled and came in front of the woman in the red dress. The woman in the red dress was Guo Qianrui, who introduced Zhuowen to the president of the Great Fortune Trading Company when he came to the Great Fortune Trading Company to auction the Heavenly Star Essence. Zhuowen had only met her once at that time. After the auction of the Heavenly Star Essence, Zhuowen left the Great Fortune Trading Company and carried out his plan to create havoc in the dark fantasy sect. In the end, he was forced to leave the star field by Yu Wuxi. This was the second time Zhuowen met Guo Qianrui. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.